It's time for This Week in Google. Jeff Jarvis is here, Paris Martineau, and joining us, special guest Cathy Gellis. She was actually in the Supreme Court hearing the oral arguments on the TikTok case. She'll give us her report for that. Also, the oral arguments that just happened today, the Supreme Court considering the Pornhub age requirement. Is that constitutional? We have a lot to talk about, including this little thing I'm wearing. It's an AI device that records every word spoken around me and gives me a report at the end of the day. I like it, but is it legal? Next on Twig.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
This is Twig, This Week in Google, episode 802, recorded Wednesday, January 15th, 2025. A sycophant in your pocket. It's time for Twig, This Week in Google, the show that will soon be renamed because it's no longer about Google. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you our hosts for the hour, the wonderful Jeff Jarvis, Professor Emeritus of Journalistic Innovation at the Craig Newmark Graduate School of Journalism at the City University. Montclair. Do we need a jingle for Montclair State University?
No, nothing can unseat
Stony Brook.
Nothing can unseat Craig.
SUNY. Hello, Jeff. How are you?
Hello. Good to see you, boss.
Also here, Paris Martineau, weekend edition of The Information, where she is working hard. Did you file your story?
I did. It's out and we can talk about it.
Good. I can't wait. Don't say anything yet. Have you taken down the red string and the pictures on the wall and all that?
My binders are in a drawer for right now.
You have to save that, don't you, for a while? The notes and so forth.
Well, I can neither confirm nor deny that for legal reasons, but in some cases, yes.
In some cases, you don't want to.
Speaking of legal reasons, Cathy Gellis is here. We love Cathy, of course, an attorney who is admitted to the Supreme Court of the United States of America. You can read her pieces in Tech Dirt, and she also is available for counsel at cgcounsel.com. Hi, Cathy.
Hello.
Your hair's growing in beautifully.
Yeah, I think I'm going to leave it like this.
I love it.
Yeah,
it's so much more
cute.
Convenient, like to travel and not have to pack a brush.
It's
very
also
liberating.
crazy. Like I had incredibly short hair for a while, and it's crazy how easy it makes showering.
Oh, I mean, yeah,
you can just walk out and you're done.
Exactly. It was traumatic to lose what I had, but once it was gone, it was sort of, this is kind of nice. I mean, it's filled in, which is better, but yeah, I don't know. I think I may stick with this. So
Cathy's, as you might know, recovering from cancer, but the prognosis is good and the hair is back.
Yep.
Yeah. So, Cathy, you went to Washington, D.C., and January 10th happened to find yourself in the third row of the United States Supreme Court just right behind the lawyers. Actually, I loved your piece for Tech Dirt where you describe what it's like to actually be in the same room as the justices.
it's kind of profound. And this one was a weird session where I was admitted after the justices were already seated. That's not usually how it happens, and then they almost didn't have a chair for me. But anyway, it all worked out, and I ended up.
Did you make a commotion?
I didn't, but I was left out with three other lawyers, and they made the commotion. And then I had said, and I wrote a brief, and they just decided to advocate for me while they were advocating for themselves. So I just kind of sat back and let people with some very good arguing skills take care of it.
The lawyer's lawyer, yeah.
I let other lawyers lawyer, and but there was a very helpful woman in the clerk's office who was like, "Yes, this shall be fixed," and she fixed it. So
fantastic.
Yeah, but no, it's definitely I was bashing the Supreme Court the day before, and then that day. I'm just sitting there and I'm, the justices are at scale. I'm only like 15 or 20 feet away. These are the human beings that are deciding everything.
Did that give you a different kind of, maybe more of a understanding of them?
Yeah, a little bit. And I think it may have affected my ability to process what was going on in the hearing, because I could hear things that weren't hitting the mic. I could see things because there's no cameras there. I could see facial expression. I could see how far forward people were leaning. I could, there's just more of the human element about how they're handling this. So it does give you information. And I guess also some of the information is, how are the human beings reacting to this? Because even when we have courts that we have more faith in, law is still a very human practice, and the human beings matter.
There they were. So you were there for the oral arguments. It's a shadow docket case, right? They accepted it at the last minute, or no?
Yeah, it's a little confusing. I guess I don't think it's not a shadow docket case anymore. Even if it was, there was a petition. There was a filing that I think was shadow docket shaped because it didn't follow the normal rules for cert, for a cert petition. But they said, look, you could consider this a cert petition and you just grant the hearing. And they did. But what was odd was they granted it immediately, which is unusual. This
was a petition from TikTok to put a stay on the or overturn, in fact, Congress's order to divest to the United States owner or to shut down. By the way, the latest on this came from TikTok this morning, probably from the Chinese government, saying, we will shut down Sunday.
There was a scoop from The Information.
Yep. Yeah, The Information had that, yeah. So so really TikTok's life hangs in the balance here, at least in the United States.
It hangs in the balance. It's also, not to be pedantic, but it kind of matters a little bit. It was actually 2 petitions went in because this was a combined case, because you had TikTok fighting for its life. And then you also had a petition from a group of users and TikTok creators who were like, hi, we're going to be affected if TikTok goes dark, because there goes our audience and all of our content and this and the other thing. So the cases got consolidated and they filed their own. They had their own filings, but basically they were all asking for the same thing. Namely, could you please press pause? Because the DC Circuit not only found the law constitutional, but then also said, and I don't remember either. They said there's no reason to stop it, or we can't stop it, but that was kind of ridiculous. So if nobody stopped it, the law goes into effect, and TikTok will be
Sunday.
Violating the law as of Sunday. Yeah. So it was
the law specifically does not require them to shut off their servers in the U.S. The law only requires Apple and Google to stop distributing the app. Is that right?
There was a lot of discussion at the hearing for, well, what does it mean? What are the implications? TikTok was kind of like, as a practical matter, this is unviable for us. And they made the point in the hearing to say, we'll have to go dark because no one who provides services to help us provide our service will be able to help us provide their service. So they were basically like, for all practical purposes, we can't function, so we have to go dark.
Cathy, was anyone standing up for the First Amendment?
Oh, it was entirely a First Amendment case. So
yeah, but we were losing, I think, to security. I mean, was there a key advocate for that?
Oh, both TikTok and the petitioners.
Well, I'm sorry. What about the court? The justices.
Yes. So the weird thing with this case is the shadow docket bit was, could you please press pause somehow? But also, we do need to file a cert petition so you can review this, because the DC Circuit on First Amendment grounds was really troubling, because what was vaguely good about it is it recognized that probably heightened scrutiny was needed to evaluate the law. But after applying strict scrutiny, it said, oh, yeah, but it's totally fine. And the way I would paraphrase that is that, and I put it in the amicus brief I filed, that they said it was strict scrutiny, but it was really rational basis. Like, did the government have any reason to be concerned? Sure. Okay. Therefore, this law is fine. And it's supposed to be a much more rigorous test than that. So the case on the merits really is, and this is how the Supreme Court granted the review, was open question. Does this law violate the First Amendment? So it was all First Amendment doctrinal to make the point to say strict scrutiny is the right scrutiny, and that when you apply it, there's no way it can apply here, given the law, its nature, its its effects and also what the claim purpose was, because it had two claim purposes. One of which was data collection issues of it's not great if China is slurping the data of Americans, which fine, that's a compelling reason. Then you would need to also answer, well, it slurps it, but is this the way to deal with the slurping? Because there's just such enormous impact on the First Amendment rights of the platform and also of the users. But then the second bit was it didn't like how the algorithm was working. It didn't like how TikTok was moderating content. And that was not content neutral. That was the government really taking issue with, we don't like the way TikTok handles speech. And that should just on its face offend the First Amendment. So then there's the issue of, okay, well, what if the data collection part was legitimate? Can you validate a law that has one legitimate purpose, but one illegitimate purpose? Even if it had a legitimate purpose, it's got all these collateral effects. So that's basically what the discussion was largely teasing out.
In fact, there is evidence that TikTok will ban posts that are critical of the Chinese government. But that you can't, the U.S. government cannot say to a publisher in the United States, we don't like what you're publishing or not publishing, therefore go away.
Well, they're doing that in Texas, but yeah.
In theory, yes, the First Amendment says no. There is a question about whether the foreign nature of TikTok affects the First Amendment analysis. But that gets complicated. So what TikTok was arguing was, but we've got a full U.S. subsidiary. And then there's also well, even if they didn't have First Amendment rights, all the American TikTok users are Americans and we get First Amendment rights. And in the amicus brief I filed for the Copy Institute, we also made the point of, if you're going to pivot the First Amendment and whether it protects somebody on how American they are, how American do they need to be? Because then you get like all these quote unquote American platforms that are owned by foreign investors. Does that disqualify them? So all of this, and then you also have the issue of if American rights can get lost because somebody else involved wouldn't get First Amendment rights, well, then that's no good either, because Americans are going to lose their rights because there's a foreign platform.
Well, what about The Guardian and the Financial Times and the BBC and...
Exactly. That was a point that was made where, wait a minute, the logic that would say that the TikTok ban is fine would also say that the American government can control whether a filmmaker can make films for the BBC or appear on Al Jazeera, or there's a number of things where, we're all talking to each other and our rights involve speaking and accepting and receiving the speech of foreign entities. And then we pointed out in our brief that it's also untethered. How American do you need to be? And it's not like the law defines it. It's not like there's any precedent that really says so. And if you start snipping around the edges, you're going to just snip the whole thing into pieces. You
note in your Tech Dirt article, the justices seem to realize that if you did push this, that foreign ownership could supersede First Amendment protection, it would have enormous effects beyond this case.
I think so. And I think we set up in our brief that you could sabotage American interests just by buying an American platform or too heavily investing in an American platform, where all of a sudden you could make that platform go poof.
Right. If you're German.
Yeah. And then there was a lot of discussion and the realization by the court that Politico is owned by somebody who's German. And clearly, I think there's some Politico readers on the court. So,
interesting.
Yeah.
That's the main thing we wanted to talk to you about. This is, by the way, much more complicated because the shutdown would be Sunday. The next day, President Trump gets inaugurated. His administration filed a brief saying, "Hey, give us some time." He asked for a stay.
Right.
So it's politically extremely complicated. But let's not think about that. Because you were in the court, I'm very curious how the oral arguments went and where you think the general press seemed to think that the justices were ready to shut TikTok down. Is that accurate?
I don't want to be glib. The potential for this court to do something stupid and horrible is high, but a lot of them were interpreting the questions from the justices to the parties as, oh, this is a sign that they don't like the argument. And I think the sign is really that a lot of these questions are help us write this decision. How do we write the rule that applies to you and is something that's scalable? What is the rule that needs to be here? So I didn't take
That's why it's hard to interpret the questions they ask as being pro or con.
But I interpreted the mechanics of basically what they were saying to be useful in that regard. Now, if they end up too splintered, that could be an issue. But right now we need 5 votes to basically at least stop this law from going into effect, although we can get to that in a second with the timing issues. But one of the things that I put in the blog post that I think was good was oral argument was originally scheduled to be 2 hours for this combined case, 30 minutes for TikTok, 30 minutes for the users, and then an hour for the government to answer and stand on this. And it turned into both sets of petitioners had over an hour.
Wow.
And I don't think the government got any significantly more time. And I don't know if they even used the hour, but it was I think we were there for about 3 hours total.
Wow.
I think that is, some significant indicia of, engagement in the issues and understanding what the issues were, which I don't think you'd see if the court was, nope, we're fine. DC Circuit got it right. And we're just, making you happy by giving you a hearing. And
was there discussion of the Trump desire for delay?
There was discussion for the Trump desire to delay, because one of the questions is, what are the options for the court right now? So the court could just come out with a decision saying, this is not constitutional law, found,
if only
law overturned. Here we go. That would be nice, but that would be an awfully quick decision and an awfully quick turnaround time.
Because they'd have to do it before Sunday.
They'd have to do it before Sunday. So then the next thing is, well, what could they do to potentially stop the clock and even just buy them more time? And one of the arguments is buy yourself the time, even if you're not quite sure what you want to do.
So they could issue a temporary stay.
Well, that's what they were discussing. They seemed to not be quite clear on what they could do. And Justice Kavanaugh, and this was also relevant to the oral argument today, seemed to think that, well, we kind of have to decide the likelihood of the merits if we're going to have an injunction. But I don't really know. And a lot of people don't know where he's coming up with that from. And TikTok said, no, you don't need to care so much. Could they do an administrative stay? Like, what could they do? And in our brief, we suggested that, if you're at all inclined to do something, press pause, find a way to do a stay, and, maybe invite for further briefing. It's not completely unprecedented, although it's not common, that they could do that. The idea that TikTok loses because there was such an accelerated timeline that didn't give enough time to appropriately challenge this before the penalty set in, like we put in our brief, that can't be the rule, because all a Congress has to do something unconstitutional is put in a really tiny timeline. Yeah, too late. Sorry, it would have been challengeable. You would have won on your challenge if only you had time to do the challenge.
You point out in your article that Trump, if the Supreme Court did nothing, TikTok shuts down on Sunday, that it's the opinion of the court that Trump could not rescue it. Actually, the petitioners said that, and Sotomayor said she was not keen, you say, on a president refusing to enforce a duly passed law.
Right. So the whole bit is if there's
inaction on the part of the court would be the same as agreeing with the government.
Yeah, I mean, some people are teasing out, and I think it was discussed at the oral argument of, well, if it's dead, how dead is dead? But one of the issues
dead, it turns out.
That's what TikTok was arguing. But one of the issues is, okay, let's say the court did press pause. So Trump has kind of pushed the Supreme Court's hand a little bit, because if they press pause and he comes in and he tries to save TikTok, does it moot the case? Part of me doesn't care if it moots the case as long as it gets rid of the DC Circuit decision, because that's the precedent that really scares me.
He can't. No president can overrule Congress.
That's what Justice Sotomayor's comment was, which is there is a law that needs to be enforced, and giving him time to come in and ignore it is not something that is supposed to actually happen. That if TikTok is in violation of it on the 19th, Trump is not supposed to be able to come in on the 20th and say, I forgive you, I bless you, or I'm going to somehow change the circumstances.
But couldn't Trump come in and say, well, my Justice Department is going to argue quite contrary to what Biden's Justice Department argued, and I want my chance?
Well, that's what he said in his amicus brief.
Right.
I think that works for an argument about how unconstitutional it is, with the fact that this ship will sail without him, even though the administration has a completely different view. I also think it undermines the DC Circuit's reasoning because they looked at the fact that both the previous Trump administration and the Biden administration didn't like TikTok. And they sort of were like, collectively, the administrations don't like TikTok.
Well,
and
he
this is like
changed
a
his
fixed voice
mind.
He's allowed to change his mind, but he can't change his mind because if this ban goes in, it takes away the ability for him to have a different policy. I think that buttresses the First Amendment argument to say this is why Congress doesn't get to do something like this, because it doesn't just decide the speech preference for the people, it decides the speech preference for the rest of the government, the current government, the future government, and, you know, that's bad too. So I think he helped on the substance argument, but his entire reason for wanting to do it is he wants to come in and be the hero. And no, he's not supposed to have that opportunity to come in and be the hero, where he kind of just wants to do his own, I have decided otherwise, which is also not how things are supposed to work.
I don't always agree with Justice Gorsuch, but in this case, he did say something that I agree with. He excoriated the use of secret evidence to underpin the government's concerns about TikTok's security.
The line came quickly, but I heard it as doing that as well, which was interesting.
Yeah. In addition, you write to lamenting that the factual record was still being laid even at this stage of the case. This is something we've always said.
How does this work? What happens? And it's like, that's not supposed to be the thing that the court is deciding.
Yeah.
Paris, you were going to say something?
Oh, I was going to say, I mean, is it feasible that if this goes through, could Trump's Justice Department just say, we're not going to enforce it?
Well, he thinks so. There's not a lot of people saying no to him. So from a practical matter, the answer may be yes, but that's not supposed to be how any of this works.
But doesn't that happen? That I mean, you see this in, for example, in abortion cases where a liberal AG in a state says, I'm not going to enforce that.
It's always a constitutional, crisis when that happens to some degree. I mean, you always see things in terms of prosecutorial discretion, but this is a really overt example of prosecutorial discretion. But TikTok is also in a position of they are essentially breaking the law as of the 20th. So this is the reason they're preparing to shut down, I would presume, is because that's a very heavy set of dice to be rolling to see what Trump would do.
There's also, and some have said this, a little neener from the Chinese Communist Party. Maybe they're hoping that there will be an uproar when all of a sudden, and this is the plan, by the way, on Sunday, unless the court stays it, that when you open your TikTok, there'll be a message saying we're no longer able to operate in the United States.
I mean, and Trump also had he had a couple of interesting points in his brief, but one that I thought was interesting was him pointing out that if we can do this to platforms in America, it teaches platforms around the world, they could do it too. Now, he was arguing it for his new buddy, Elon, who was unhappy with what Brazil did to him. But even though Elon gratuitously poked the bear, I think his fundamental liberty points were actually quite sound. So, and I think Trump makes a good point here. Trump also made a good point to say that the DC Circuit really didn't consider the interests of American users very much as they were considering the First Amendment impact. He was arguing it because he misunderstands things in the way that Murty versus Missouri misunderstood them, but he's not wrong in terms of on the face of that argument. And, I look forward to shoving all of that really good argument back down his throat as we continue to litigate things in his administration. But it wasn't wrong on its face. And the DC Circuit was, I think.
Let me ask a ridiculously broad question. This goes to the other case that was before the court today about Pornhub and such. What's the zeitgeist about the internet that you heard from the justices? Like, oh, yeah, it's the internet. It's awful. We hate it. Or no, there's something there to protect? Or did you see any kind of larger worldview of the net?
I felt a little bit better on the after the TikTok versus the today's hearing. The zeitgeist from today made me think that the justices have some fear of the internet, that the protections that they were willing to afford it earlier on now they're kind of like, yeah, but the technology is in a different place. Maybe we have to think about this differently. So I didn't enjoy the zeitgeist that was kind of emerging today. But the case today was in a case that involved adult content, which also has some complicated optics. So it's a little tempered like that. I actually thought there were a couple of high points with the TikTok hearing, where there's a couple things that we thought were going to be hard uphill arguments that I think we've won. One of them is that there seems to be an understanding that that internet platforms themselves have some First Amendment protection.
Oh, yeah.
And that, because that's something that's underpinning like TikTok's challenge. Mm-hmm. And they didn't really have to argue it. It was something that Moody versus NetChoice had addressed. And it appears to largely be accepted. And that's a really interesting point, that was like the starting position, as opposed to ground that TikTok needed to win in order to make its arguments.
Yeah.
So that's significant. And then related to that, it also felt like the justices understood that algorithmic moderation was an expression of editorial discretion, and that they could understand that the First Amendment extended to that, which was also something that in theory TikTok would need to argue, and it did not feel like it was ground it actually needed to cover. That loop was already closed. I could be wrong. They could always do weird things, but if for your zeitgeist question, if I'm right, and that's what I was hearing, these are two very significant things. And again, one point that we put in, one reason I dropped everything over the holidays to write an amicus brief is because everything that they decide in every single case reverberates in every future case that's ever going to be before them. Yeah. And all of this is basically putting together a curriculum, granted a very disorganized curriculum, to try to teach the justices how to think about these things. And so I wanted to write now to teach them things, and to also to show them that what they decide here will matter, and will matter in other contexts, because it will. And I wish I had been able to write a decision for the case that got heard today earlier in the year, because again, that instance was a bad law, but I want the court to think about how all these issues present themselves, not just when you're dealing with Pornhub, but when you're dealing with everything.
Well, there's also this sense of content. My favorite moment that I put up a tweet on line 115, Leo, of I think they're trying to understand the internet in the context of what they would consider content.
Yeah, so Justice Alito said, isn't like Playboy that there's stuff, he says, essays, modern day Gore Vidal, stuff like that.
Does Pornhub
By the way, there's a great article, which I'll show you later. There's a woman who, besides having an adult channel on OnlyFans, has a Pornhub channel that is not adult, that is safe for work, in which she discusses math. She teaches math. And the reason she does it is because the royalties are so much better. She puts the same stuff on YouTube, but the royalties are so much better on Pornhub.
Oh, is that presented in any of the briefing? Because that's
no, I don't think so.
Oh,
isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
So it does answer Justice Alito's seemingly naive question. Yeah, there's
or there's gives an excuse. Stuff. No, honey, I was learning math.
I was watching a video on neural networks.
So in today's hearing, Justice Gorsuch was really trying to hold the Free Speech Coalition's lawyers' feet to the fire in a way I found really unfortunate, to basically say, and how much is, he used more technical terms, how much is adult content and how much isn't? And he was really trying to get a number, and the lawyer was fumbling around with trying to give him the number, and partly because he's representing a consortium, so the number is going to vary across the platforms. I don't think he fielded that part well, and the beginning of today's hearing really had me not happy. But Jodis Sotomayor, I think, saved the day, because she pointed out this is really a very basic case, the one that was heard today, which was the district court had decided that based on the preliminary record before it, it was going to enjoin the law, subject to further hearing and trial and considering whether it truly is unconstitutional. But I thought there's enough here to be really worried. It put the brakes on it. And then the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals said, we're not going to apply heightened scrutiny. We're going to apply rational basis scrutiny, and this law is totally fine. So the injunction went out the window. So all that's really happening here was trying to argue, hang on a second, wasn't the Fifth Circuit wrong about what level of scrutiny applies? Surely it's strict scrutiny. the Fifth Circuit's decision should be vacated, and we send it back there for further proceedings, now applying the correct standard. Because then you can make the question of, okay, with heightened scrutiny, strict scrutiny in particular, is that law okay?
Could you
Texas law.
Explain what is strict scrutiny or heightened scrutiny? What are we talking about here?
Yeah, there's very specific ways of saying it, and I'm just going to end up paraphrasing it, but it's all very Googleable for the correct way. But basically, for strict scrutiny, when you have these liberty interests like free expression, if the government is going to be able to trample them, you want to look for a couple things. One, did they have a compelling reason to do the trampling? And two, did they use the narrowest means possible to, I think it says the narrowest possible to do the trampling, because you want to make sure you're not doing gratuitous amounts of collateral damage to these protected liberties.
I love it but I don't think there are very many other countries that are so protective of free speech, of First Amendment rights.
I don't think there are.
It's
and
really
I would
remarkable.
like us to continue to be the leader here.
Yeah.
And I worry about how they do these cases, whether that will still be the case or not.
Even with strict scrutiny, do the security concerns about TikTok outweigh its and its creators' First Amendment rights? Is that the question?
So just to close the loop on today's, so Sotomayor was saying, but it's going to be a similar question.
The Pornhub decision.
So for the Pornhub one today, what Sotomayor was saying is that what we need to say is that strict scrutiny was the thing that was supposed to apply. Send it back to the lower court. They can apply strict scrutiny. Then arguably there will be another appeal because they'll apply it, and maybe they find that no, the law totally passes strict scrutiny, and somebody's going to be unhappy when they apply strict scrutiny to this.
Yeah.
So there will be another appeal, and then the court will revisit the question to figure out, based on what Texas was trying to do, was the strict scrutiny analysis correct? Which kind of puts us in the position of where we were with the TikTok ban, because the DC Circuit did apply strict scrutiny, but applied it in a very casual way, or that's my term. They applied it in a way that I don't think met the muster of what the test was supposed to do. And therefore,
they said, we haven't seen the evidence, but sure, if the government thinks it's bad, it must be true.
They credited a lot. So to get to your question, and it's basically a question for the court, there was a lot of traction, particularly with Kavanaugh, but all the justices bought into it, that slurping the data presents a real issue for America, and maybe it's a real security concern. But TikTok made a point of, okay, then pass a data protection law, and we're going to wonder why you're calling this one a data protection law when there's a whole bunch of slurpy activities you didn't bother to make illegal.
Much worse, frankly.
I'm sorry?
Much worse slurpy activities.
Slurpier things, other slurping by other Chinese platforms, which are untouched by this law. American platforms are still slurping it. And we pointed out in our brief that even if China doesn't slurp it directly, they could just go buy it from a data broker. So you haven't actually solved the problem.
Yeah.
So one of the arguments—
I love that you've made slurpage a legal term.
I think slurpage needs to be the legal term. But so you've got this law that has huge effects. You're going to obliterate a platform and all the speech that the platform facilitates, and you haven't even solved the problem you may have had a compelling reason to go solve. So TikTok is saying, that's a problem. You really need to look for, are those means that it's using to meet that compelling purpose narrowly tailored enough? Because look at all this collateral damage you have, and you aren't even accomplishing anything. But then there's also the related question of, okay, then you also have an impermissible purpose, which was it doesn't like the way TikTok moderates content. And one of the stated purposes of Congress was to go after those moderations. They're just mad in theory that it's covertly moderated, but TikTok was like, and what does that mean? That basically means that, and if that was your problem, what could you do? You could maybe mandate disclosures or something like that. You don't have to obliterate the platform, even if that was a valid concern.
It seems very clear that the First Amendment prevents the government from telling a private entity how they should moderate. That seems really clear. I think so. And
Moody versus NetChoice gets everybody there, but TikTok is maybe a little too Chinese to qualify for that. And that seems to be the thing that's making everybody lose their minds. So the reason I'm somewhat
so really the only ground that the government can complain about is slurpage?
Well, slurpage, I think there was no issue of whether it was.
Well, what's the security issue? They can't complain about moderation.
Propaganda, right?
Well, slurpage is security, isn't it?
Yeah, the slurpage.
That's the only security. Propaganda doesn't count. The government cannot tell an entity what to say.
Right. I think the idea to say the slurpage is a national security concern is okay, fine. That's a lot easier to accept. But saying that the moderation is a national security concern, in theory, that is not an argument that the government should be able to make. And so, yeah, that was probably in play at the hearing. It's not stuck in my mind as much.
That the justices understood that if they were there, that would be a can of worms if they were to open that up.
I mean, I felt like I counted at least 5 votes who understood that there were concerns that the DC Circuit just kind of plowed through. What I'm less sure about is if the court really knows what, if anything, it can do about it and what rule that it would write. But one of the things is these things in theory should be very small. Like, press pause on this. Maybe ask for more briefing. I mean, I think they could reach the merits. I don't think this is a hard case on the merits, but since everybody is all upset about it and maybe some justices think that there's some validity to the government's argument, I don't know, press pause. Let's get more briefing, including more briefing. We had no commercial platforms in this as amici, except the only 2 amici who operate platforms were my client, the Copia Institute, aka Tector, and Donald Trump. I mean, that's ridiculous. It was us and Donald Trump. How does that happen when, you have the entire industry with platforms upon platforms? And they didn't brief for a number of reasons, but one of them was the practical concern of everybody had to drop everything and brief in an unusually short time frame. It was just completely accelerated. And so you didn't get to have all the voices to kind of point out, like, when the amici show up, they can really sort of frame what the speech interests are, because they can talk about, if this goes forward, here's how we will be affected. And they didn't brief in TikTok, and they underbriefed as well in the Free Speech Coalition one. And I think that's a problem as well, because it's too easy for the justices to think this is all about adult content and not recognize that these sorts of laws will have impact on things that are clearly protected speech. They had to use their imaginations a lot more, and that's not really a good thing. We don't really want the justices to have to use their imaginations. We'd rather tell them what they need to think.
You also say in your article, you point out that one of the justices in the past has said you don't have the 9 biggest internet experts here.
Right.
You point out that part of their job and part of the reason you write the briefs is to become internet experts. If they're gonna rule on these cases, they need to know what they're ruling.
Listen to them.
Well, that's why I was saying, like, why I dropped everything to write the brief, because every case involves an issue that's going to reverberate later on. So think of, if I'm right and we've got certain wins where they understand that the platforms have First Amendment rights, and if they understand that algorithms are expressions of that, like, that is going to matter for everything else that they hear. So we've sort of accidentally been building this curriculum for the court. It's unusual for the Supreme Court because the Supreme Court is one stable, well, more or less stable set of the same justices. Whereas when you're at the courts of appeals, you get rotating judges because it's not always the same 3 who end up hearing your case. So there's a lot more room for variability, and you don't know how expert each one is, and you have to kind of go from 0 to 60 when you're at the Court of Appeals. But one of the reasons what I think about it with my Supreme Court practice is we are building because we're not just here for this case. It's the same brains that are going to be deciding court cases down the road. And if I want to look for an opportunity in this first case to teach them something, they're going to need to know for the cases that are coming down the pike.
Yeah, good.
I put in the rundown that Senator Markey has proposed a bill to grant a 270-day extension on the TikTok ban. I don't know whether that will go anywhere in this. It
would have to be passed by Friday.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know how I feel about it. I mean, I don't know. I'm a little agnostic, but I also don't really want to. I don't know if I want to moot the litigation either. But as long as the DC Circuit's decision is no longer good law, I don't care nearly as much. I'd rather start with nothing, but I do not want to be haunted by that. So as long as that is obviated somehow, whatever.
Will the Supreme Court make a ruling in the next 3 days?
My personal feeling, so a lot of people are like, wait a minute, silence indicates that there's some trouble, and maybe that's true. I had the personal feeling that they were waiting for today's hearing because today was dealing with a First Amendment case, and that no sense kind of doing something too soon. Like this would help inform their thinking because they're going to need two decisions that in theory don't clash. So now I think the clock is running, where I'd expect something at any time, but we don't know. And I don't think they know. And you have principled people who are willing to stick with doctrine. You have confused people who aren't. And I don't know. That's the reason it's hard to be completely bullish about what this court will do, because a lot of what it does is, in theory, this is no way to run a railroad. And it's really, seeing those 9 human beings up close, it's particularly human, this particular iteration of the court.
How are they going to rule on the Pornhub thing? These were arguments, right? They didn't rule, did they?
No, they didn't rule. So this one, we wouldn't necessarily expect the decision all that soon.
That could be this spring, right?
But because
there's no urgency.
Well, actually, I take that back. There might be urgency because there's no injunction at the moment. So I think the law is in effect. So right now you're actually accruing harm. So it would be nice if they actually did something sooner before later. And there is some exigency in actually putting, if there's any inclination to enjoin the law or at least stay it, or, buy yourself more time to live to fight another day. So I think what I'm hoping from both these cases is that the court is willing to say there's big issues here and we should at least live to fight another day, as opposed to let harm accrue now when we're not entirely sure. And it's going to take a lot more thinking to tease out whether this harm is constitutionally inflicted or not.
So the ideal situation from your point of view would be 2 stays. A stay of the TikTok law and a stay of the Texas law. By the way, Texas is not the only state that's doing this.
There's a dozen.
No, and I think it's the courts have generally been ruling against age verification, but I think there was just one out of the 6 that went the other way. So this is a live issue that's causing lots of problems, and the litigation is still happening in all these other cases. So, and I think the justices were aware of it. I think Kagan in particular was sort of aware that, this is just one of many, and that these other cases are not necessarily implicating adult content, that they're dealing with also, other forms.
Are there other internet cases on the docket this session?
I need to check, but these were the biggest ones I was aware of.
Yeah.
There is a pending cert petition for Cox versus Sony, which is a DMCA case. Well, it used to be a DMCA case. It may kind of still be a DMCA case, but this is one where the ISPs, like the big Cox Communications and Grande Communications, these big ISPs were not terminating users when they got the takedown notices, which in theory now all of a sudden they had to do. And I think it's framed as a copyright case, but I think it's really a First Amendment case. And I'm really hoping that cert is granted so I can write a nice First Amendment brief in that case as well.
It's really fascinating.
Does this all make sense? Like, I'm just like, it makes sense in my head, but
I'm going to blame you if it goes the wrong way for my depression that comes, but.
Yeah, the reasons people bring up for TikTok are the issue of propaganda, and I don't know what the justices will do, but I think we can all agree that that is a First Amendment protected. Propaganda is protected by the First Amendment.
Normally, yes. Yeah, and there is precedent.
As is moderation is protected by the First Amendment. You don't even need Section 230 to do that. The government cannot step in and say, no, you got to do that, you got to do this. This is something conservatives have been saying about the previous administration's relationship with the TikTok, X.com, or Twitter as it was known then. So that seems to be some agreement. Your government's not allowed to do that. So the only thing is the national security issue, and that has to do with slurpage. Right? Well,
in theory, I mean, the national security concern has brought up in both contexts for the slurpage.
I understand,
and the moderation.
But we can throw out moderation propaganda. I think any reasonable person would say, well, that's protected.
Right.
So, I think the TikTok's argument that, well, if you really care about this, you should have a law about everybody else too. All you're doing is banning us. when everybody else and their brother is slurping up as much as possible all the time, and frankly, selling it to the highest bidder, including China. That seems very persuasive.
I think so. I don't entirely know what the conniptions are and why this isn't, why there's pushback. Sometimes a lot of it is the optics. Justice Kavanaugh.
Does that work though with the Supreme Court to say, well, if you really cared, the law would be broader? Is that a way of arguing against a law? Oh, it should be broader?
It's hard to say. The problem is sometimes their jurisprudence is pure and respectful of prior precedent, and sometimes their jurisprudence is whatever they really wanted to have happen, and it comes from the same justices, so it's really confusing. Justice Kavanaugh, in particular, in the TikTok hearing, seemed really exercised by the national security concerns. He mostly was exercised with them in the data context, but it's not like TikTok was really trying to hold the line and say, we're not saying you don't get to be concerned or Congress doesn't get to be concerned. Go ahead and be concerned and pass an appropriately tailored law. And if the law doesn't even solve the problem, it's really hard to argue it's appropriately tailored when it then also has all these collateral effects. So one of the issues
that can be persuasive that, hey, Your Honor, they're picking on us because we're Chinese. That could be persuasive.
Well, that's popular these days.
Yeah, well, yes. I don't know if they were saying we're being picked on because we're Chinese, because there was the issue of, well, why didn't you sweep up Temu too? But what they were basically saying is we're being picked on for speech-related reasons because really you didn't like the speech that our platform was facilitating, and that is should be a per se violation of the Constitution.
That's all you need. Yeah.
So then, meanwhile, in today, the Texas Attorney General had conveniently not read one of the major First Amendment and the internet cases that the Supreme Court has actually issued, a case called Packingham. And that was not a good moment for a lawyer to be called out, where Justice Jackson was asking, and what about this case? And he says, I haven't read it.
Oh, boy.
That's good, because it's not like it came out that long ago.
First year law, right?
Yeah, I remember a classmate in law school who was, Mr. So-and-so, did you read the case? And it was a really painful moment for my friend when he had not. This was not good.
Did you ever see The Paper Chase? You must have.
I didn't.
What a great movie.
Mostly because I think a lot of that sort of Socratic abuse had sort of been discredited by the time I was a law student.
Oh, but it was
it's still
well,
amusing.
that's the famous moment in that where John Huston, is it John Huston? The professor. So. It's Houston, Walter Houston. Anyway, he takes a dime and he says, here's a dime.
Houseman.
John Houseman, that's right. Yes, formerly a colleague of Orson Welles in the Mercury Theater, the legendary John Houseman says, here's a dime, call your mother and tell her you're not going to be a lawyer.
Yeah, by the time I got to law school, it's generally a kinder and gentler
that's too bad.
Experience.
I think John Houseman had the right idea.
Oh, thank you very much. But also, that was in theories. I think it was set in Harvard, and I went to
Harvard Law,
Boston University School
70s.
of Law. Yeah. So we just sort of like gazed down the river at the little brick schoolhouse, and I think probably got a better education.
I saw it at the Yale Law Film Society when I was at Yale, so we all laughed at Harvard Law. You're watching This Week in Google. Cathy Gellis, a very special guest to talk about all these First Amendment slurpage things. It's good to have you, Cathy. Thank you from Tech Dirt and on the Blue Sky at Cathy Gellis. They did mention Blue Sky, didn't they?
So yeah, somebody got mad at my Tech Dirt post because I didn't explain the context that Justice Kagan mentioned it, but I couldn't quite remember, and it wasn't hugely important to the other things. But at some point, and this is kind of key, I was remembering later, Kagan seems to be particularly clued in with the fact that these cases have implications for other platforms and is most aware of the ecosystem. And there was some discussion in the TikTok case about, well, if you didn't have TikTok, then what? And TikTok was pushing back to say, other companies have tried to have a TikTok-like service, and it wasn't TikTok. I think it was the users. The users were saying we've tried them out and we just don't find them sufficient.
That's not true. That's silly. My son has moved from TikTok to Instagram.
Well, it depends on what you want out of them.
Maybe that works for him, but in any case,
There's always Pornhub.
In theory, it shouldn't be fungible because the whole point of the editorial discretion is all of them are going to do the moderation a little bit differently.
If they're all the same, then that obviates your argument.
Right, exactly. So there was that, and I can't remember if it came up then, but in terms of discussing other things that are new that would come up, at some point, Justice Kagan was like, "What's that new one? Oh, Blue Sky." And if I were really pedantic, I'd go back and look at the transcript and see what that comment followed. But having written an amicus brief before the Supreme Court with Blue Sky as the client, I feel a little ahead of the curve here.
How long do you think it will be until a justice says the word skeet?
Never.
Probably not this term, unless we have something that all of a sudden ends up an emergency fix it. Well,
let's actually hope they don't, so they can just ignore Blue Sky, let it be.
I mean, the way they end up, having their discussions, I could see it happening. I wouldn't rule it out. I'm more thinking about, is there going to be a plausible opportunity where it won't be completely out of context? And I don't know if we have anything on the docket before the end of this term.
Cathy Gellis is here. Jeff Jarvis, of course. Paris Martineau, our regulars. You're watching This Week in Google. And as I mentioned, we're going to change the name, but the show is going to stay pretty much the same. We're going to cover intelligent machines, which we have always done. So that will start February 5th on Paris's birthday. It's our little gift.
So, by the way, I mentioned this as the show was on last week to Jason Howell, since I'm also on AI Inside.
We don't want to duplicate what
Jason
you guys
said.
are doing.
Jason said immediately, he said, great idea. And he said the name should have changed long ago.
Yeah, he's right. He was he was a supporter of This Week in Google. He did our Android show, but Google has not been all that interested. We have a few things that could actually be in the changelog this week. Hey, do you want to do some acting, Paris Martineau?
Love it.
I thought a amuse-bouche to freshen the palate before we move on to other difficult things.
Get that Supreme Court out of your mouth.
Get that Supreme Court out. Have you seen this article? It's on the.
I have not.
On the rundown. I thought maybe you and I could act this out. I'll be Gary, you be Cindy.
Okay, great.
Okay. This is from McSweeney's, a marriage proposal spoken entirely in office jargon. Hey, Cindy. Now, how are you got to be able to see this. Can you see it?
I'm pulling it up on my screen right now. Hold on.
Okay.
Yeah, I got it.
Because you got to have lines, okay? Very important. All right. Let's start over here. Hey, Cindy. Remember that other day when we were talking about optimizations?
Yeah, I wanted to circle back on that.
Me too. Now, you said you wanted to see hockey stick growth. Well, I've realized I want to see hockey stick growth too in our relationship.
Unpack that for me.
So this relationship has been such a value add. Some of my friends were worried that it would take too long for us to get into alignment, but you have been an absolute rock star.
I feel the same way, Gary. The ROI on this relationship has been unbelievable. You've really given 110%.
So I wanted to close the loop. In addition to the other deliverables, I have one more. He takes a knee and holds out his hand. It's this wedding ring, Cindy. Will you marry me?
I will. Gary, you've been an absolute ninja. This really moves the needle in a significant way.
Cindy, getting married will represent a huge pivot, but I see it as a quick win and a real solve.
Me too. And we can talk about this later, but I do want to make sure we go forward with a single source of truth.
Oh, break that down for me.
I used to be with a guy who was full of valuable insights, but his insights weren't actionable, let alone fungible.
Sounds like low-hanging fruit.
He was, and I know you're different. The synergy is unbelievable, but I want to make sure that we stay focused on core values, which for me comes down to the bottom line.
By bottom line, you're talking about the financials?
Not having enough to spend was a big pain point for me. I don't know how else to say it. You're more than your financials, but you're not less than them.
Long pause. I think I understand.
I just wanted to touch base on how you're feeling about that.
Well, look, we both know the importance of data-driven insights, so I think I've got a solve. What if we set up a weekly one-on-one to check in and stack hands on the financials as we start to plan for our new normal?
I would love that. But, I'm so sorry. I have a 3:30.
Oh, well, let's table this for now. In the meantime, they should have said, let's put a pin in that. But anyway, if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to ask.
Sounds good. Let's circle back tonight and we can action on our solve.
Very nice. I love McSweeney's. That was just a little amuse-bouche. Evan Barber, a marriage proposal spoke entirely in office jargon. Which if you've ever worked in an office, you will recognize.
And very good acting on both your parts. I think I want to make this a regular thing.
Yeah.
McSweeney's also published a great thing last week, similar Rye piece entitled, "Did you even possibly consider every possible lived experience before recklessly posting your chili recipe on social media?" It's really good. Would recommend that.
Actually, since you mentioned Blue Sky, big announcement from Blue Sky. They're opening their own photo sharing site.
Take that.
I think that it's being opened on the @protocol. I'm not
That's
certain
right. It's
as to
AT
whether
Protocol.
It's by
That's right.
Blue Sky itself, the entity.
Yeah, I think I saw a skeet from Masnick saying that it's not theirs, it's somebody else's.
Good.
It's the thing that can happen because.
Even better.
Hey.
Yeah.
And this comes in following the story from 404 Media that Instagram and all the Meta properties are actually blocking, in fact, banning you if you mention the Mastodon competitor, PixelFed, which has caused huge interest in PixelFed, of course.
Yeah.
The Streisand effect.
I think Mark Zuckerberg has really kicked off a significant exodus from all of the Meta properties.
Sanity, yes. Yeah. Since you're on Blue Sky, can I get your opinions about, because I'm really not sure about it, free our feeds?
I don't know anything about it yet. I'm aware of it.
I'm hoping that Mike will write about this.
I think he is writing about it. I think it's one of the things that sometimes when he finds things too fascinating, they take a lot longer to write because he keeps going and going and going. So I think it's underway. I'm sure there will be something.
The idea is it's an initiative to protect Blue Sky's AT protocol. A group of international
control away from the people who run Blue Sky?
A group of international tech entrepreneurs and advocates has launched a campaign to protect our algorithms from billionaires. It's on GoFundMe. It's hashtag #FreeOurFeeds. Help secure the future of social media. So they've raised $51,000.
They're going for $30 million. I had an exchange today with Eli Pariser, who's one of the many names on it. There's a lot of big names on it.
He's the filter bubble fella.
Yep. And the people I like Craig Newmark on it, but there's also people I don't like so much, like Shoshana Zuboff and others. I said to Eli today, so what's the $30 million going for? Mastodon.
Well, it says $4 million on GoFundMe.
No, they're saying $30 million.
30
raise.
In their announcements. Yeah, right. I think that's
if you go
the
there.
GoFundMe amount they want to raise.
Yeah.
So, and Dave Weiner said, well, there's not a single technologist in the list. What are they going to build? What is it going to do? And when I asked Eli today, I didn't really get an answer that meant anything.
Here's the manifesto from freeourfeeds.com. With Zuckerberg going full Musk last week, we can no longer let billionaires control our digital public square. Okay. Blue Sky is an opportunity to shake up the status quo, but it will take independent funding and governance to turn Blue Sky's underlying tech, the AT protocol, into something, or should I say the AT protocol? It's capped, but I think it's really the AT protocol.
I say the AT protocol, but I don't know if that's right or not.
Yeah, into something more powerful. You know what it is.
It's all Greek to me.
It's their version of ActivityPub, which is the Mastodon Fediverse protocol, into something more powerful than a single app. We want to create an entire ecosystem of interconnected apps in different companies. Feels like this has been done already with Mastodon. Excuse me.
Well, exactly, and that's also what Dave Weiner said. He did a 5-minute podcast about this. But go to the list of names.
Technical advisors and custodians. Mozilla Foundation Executive Director Nabia Syed.
Mark Sermon from Mozilla, who I respect.
Mozilla's Mark. So Mozilla's very much into this.
There are two people on this board. And then if you keep going down, Then it's
Jimmy
Wales.
Wales.
We like Shoshana Zuboff.
Mark Ruffalo, the actor.
Ruffalo. Roger
McNamee
drives me completely insane.
Brian Eno, Corey's on.
Corey Doctorow.
Corey was on
Corey.
Twit on Sunday. I guess maybe he was keeping quiet about it. He didn't mention it at all.
So I think I'm very excited that people with resources are willing to spend it to recreate our media environment. And I mean that in all sorts of ways, both in terms of reestablishing platform technology and also reestablishing news outlets. And there's a lot of places that money could and should be spent. But if they're not going to spend it carefully or efficiently, all we have done is wasted the money.
Yeah, well, they're raising the money to tell you what they're going to spend it on. What's their goal?
It's just more,
what are they trying to do?
We already have Mastodon, which, by the way, Eugen did something remarkable this week. He had decided to give up basically Mastodon. He owns it just because he wrote it, right? But they are now going to create, in the next 6 months, we'll see transformation of the Mastodon structures, he wrote, shifting away from the early days single person ownership, enshrining the envisioned independence in a dedicated European not-for-profit entity. Eugen is going to hand off the overall Mastodon management. He'll focus on product strategy. He's going to stay involved, but there'll be a board. It'll be it's a 501c3 in the U.S. that will continue to function as a fundraising hub, he says. But the Mastodon entity has now become was stripped away of its charitable status in Germany, weirdly. So
I think there was a logistical problem with it where I don't know, something about like how they had to spend the money, and it just German law, I think, became really difficult to comply with. Right.
So they're going to be an EU public benefit company. I think this is exactly the right way to do it.
Should do, yeah.
And this is an existing protocol. PixelFed, which we were just talking about, is a photo sharing site based on Mastodon. There are other Fediverse applications, quite a few of them. Fediverse supports Posse, which is something I believe in. The post on your own site, then syndicate everywhere. I think this is done. I'm not a big fan of. I'll have to ask Corey though, because I do trust Corey, but I just don't think this needs to be done.
If AT would federate with ActivityPub, we're there. We're there. I love Blue Sky.
Hasn't Blue Sky said that's on the roadmap?
Yeah,
that they're working on federation.
Corey has said, and he said it again.
But is it with AT or not? Is the question? I mean,
yes.
ActivityPub or not?
Yes. No, it isn't. Corey said, yeah, fine. It's in their roadmap. They haven't done it. I am not going to start using Blue Sky because I don't want to be trapped again, as I was on Twitter X, by having all my friends on somewhere I cannot then move them to somewhere else from.
Can we get Jay Graber on the show?
Well,
yeah, we can get Jay on. That's a good idea.
So
we better get her on quick because I don't know if she's an intelligent machine.
So I think you've answered your question though for why have this too, because we're less likely to get stuck when we have redundancy, and also then interoperability. So I don't think just pointing to, well, we solved it with Mastodon is good enough, because we've solved things before and then something happens where something happens to the thing. So you've got the flexibility. I
disagree. It's an open protocol. The worst thing you can do is create multiple standards. That doesn't solve the, hit by a bus one man problem. An open protocol is forkable. It's open. It's not like an entity that is risky, I think. So,
I think we need to see the details to see what it ends up
Amen.
doing. Yeah.
There's no details here. That's my problem with it.
I took it a little bit more as being able to be a haven. Okay, this was just my guess.
You're a nice
so I can't really substantiate it. But I took it as if Blue Sky went stupid, that you could just slurp everything out of Blue Sky and stick it on something else and be good to go. So I saw it as trying to protect that as opposed to trying to recreate the redundancy that Mastodon has. It just sort of seemed like a way to buttress and backstop Blue Sky, so we were not Blue Sky company dependent.
Yeah, maybe that's what's going on, is that they share. In fact, Corey is a signatory, so maybe that's really what he's saying is, look, until they federate, it's just a centralized silo like Twitter was, and so this is a little kind of nudge to get them to federate. But why $30 million?
Yeah, and it's just.
Yeah, more
I would sign
transparency
on
would
to
be
a
good.
letter that said, "Blue Sky Federate or else." That's fair.
I mean, Blue Sky publicly launched February 6, 2024. It's been less than a year.
Yes,
I don't want, I'm never the person that's like, gotta hand it to a tech company. Let's hold out hope. But this company's been around for a very short period of time.
In
I think
chaos.
and in absolute chaos, dealing with unforeseen surges in users that they were not prepared
Right.
for. It's a miracle that it still works and seems to be decent at what it's trying to do.
Mhm.
I don't know.
What
If
Paris
it doesn't
says.
happen by the end of this year, then yeah, maybe there's a leg to stand on in calling for it to take up that mantle more seriously, or else users should leave. But
Just to back up to the Mastodon point, it's a point we had in our amicus brief where we were talking about the how American do you need to be, where we pointed out that some of these alternatives were being built and that Mastodon was an awful lot of Germans were helping to build Mastodon. What do you mean that's not okay? So all these things have impact.
Good.
Yeah.
Well,
These are good things happening around wanting to have alternatives to Musk and Musk Jr., otherwise known as Zuckerberg.
Yeah, boy, that was more trauma than I was expecting. I mean, it was never a great site and he was never really great, but this is a level of not greatness that's
He's
really
gone.
sort of
He's
intolerable.
gone wacko.
Yeah.
so we talked a little bit. Did we talk about it last week? Had it happened yet? Yeah.
Did you see the Mark Lemley? So yes. Major Stanford. You can say who he is better than I can, but he fired Meta. Cathy, you want to mention who Mark Lemley is?
Mark Lemley is a very renowned IP scholar. He's a professor at Stanford, but he's also essentially a practicing attorney. And at his current firm, he had been helping represent Meta in its AI litigation. It had been sued by copyright holders, essentially, and he was trying to hold a line that I share, which is that no copyright law does not create a cause of action against AI training. So he was helping with Facebook's defense, but that meant, when he was kind of like, how do I demetify myself? He was kind of like, I don't think I can support this company anymore. This is the kinds of things they are very loudly doing are not things he felt comfortable being associated with. So he terminated his representation.
I have struggled with how to respond to Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook's descent into toxic masculinity and neo-Nazi madness.
Yeah.
Can't get blunter than that.
I understand his point of view. I wouldn't want to be associated with that. But we've also seen these Facebook boycotts come and go. I participated.
This is
I think this one's going to have more traction.
You think?
Oh, yeah.
He's a big deal.
Most of a very significant chunk of my Facebook friends, even ones I don't hear about, are writing long think pieces about, I think we might need to leave. And most of the stress is, unlike with Twitter, where there kind of were life rafts to go to, because initially there was Mastodon, and then by the time everybody else left, there was Blue Sky. We don't really have a Facebook alternative at the moment, which I think is a huge shame. And if people want to spend their money, that's probably the thing to spend the money on, to give us an alternative. But I think people are looking to go. They're all backing off, and they're trying to decommitting and not writing as much, not posting as much, really isolating. A whole bunch of people who chose Threads are like, well, why bother with that? If you were on Instagram, you could go to PixelFed. People are I'm seeing a lot of people draw some really hard lines. I just saw today Will Wheaton said, screw this, I'm done. It wasn't good for my writing anyway, but I thought I needed it for exposure. And he's like, he's basically just going to self-publish and syndicate. So I'm seeing that in a lot of places. And then the fact that the Mark Lemley story, I know Mark is a friend. I was saying things because I'm friends, also on Facebook with Mark Lemley. And then the fact that it's ending up in the news, that's a sign of the traction. And the headlines are top-notch lawyer, fires Facebook. I mean, just the optics on it was, people are like, wow, the toasting, and they're sort of admiring the toasting that happened with it.
Ironically, I mean, I'm not a Facebook fan. I have an account just as I do with Instagram and all the other crap, just so that I can see what's going on. I just went there. I don't see a lot of disinformation or or even stuff from people who aren't my friends.
No.
Maybe because every time I'm there, I delete the
You may
crappy
not
stuff.
even be seeing your friends. One of the big objections
Well,
that
I
people
think I
have had for a
am
long
though.
time
Every
is
every single post on here is somebody. I
No, that
follow.
weird things was not your friend. That was something they threw in, telling you to follow it.
yeah.
Well, I delete those as soon as I see
The
them.
quality
I
of the
say, "Hide
feed
that
has
stuff."
been really bad, and a lot of people are complaining. Like the value proposition of Facebook is like it's really cool to stay in touch with some people you don't otherwise have an easy, seamless way to stay in touch with, and Facebook has increasingly been sucking at that. When that is really the only reason that people are still staying, because they're not doing things for the bigger discussions, or sometimes they're dealing with it because they've got some really groups that they're invested with, and they need. That's the platform they've been using for the groups. And otherwise, I want to keep track of my friends, but you can't keep track of your friends because Facebook's not bothering to give you your friends.
Paris, congratulations on your new job at Wired from your Facebook feed, I see.
What?
I was going to say, when's the last time that I used Facebook? I don't know.
October 8th, 2018.
See, because whenever I'm there, I hide stuff like that weird thing. I just hid that. I do have mostly, almost entirely, people like Jeff Jarvis that are people I'm actively following in here.
Do you get my stuff? Although I don't
am I
know
following?
when
Am I a friend? Am I your friend? I don't know.
We're friends. We're friends, and then you ignored me.
Yeah, I mean, there is an algorithm, I guess, right? So maybe I'm not seeing all your stuff. I know how to do that, by the way, which is to go to feeds.
Yeah, there's kind of
friends,
a way to shortcut
and
it.
now it's all just friends.
Right.
And honestly, I think this is fine. And if there is disinformation, I think that the community notes is fine. But I understand that the issue is not me, that the issue is other people, maybe even in other countries, for whom Facebook will be a problem.
Well, it's not
talked
just
about
that,
last
but it's his entire attitude.
It's more the leadership than
it's a leadership thing. I mean, I think he's just playing chicken with a whole bunch of employment lawyers and the state of California, where he's going to get some litigation trouble with
but
how he
we just talked about how companies get to run themselves the way they want to run themselves.
In terms of the platform, like I would defend his ability to moderate really stupidly, although what is basically telegraphing is that it's going to be really stupid moderation. He has the legal right to moderate stupidly, but stupid is what's coming because there's nothing thoughtful about it. He's complaining that we're not masculine enough. But that's going to be a problem in terms of who he hires and fires. Because there are laws that have generally survived constitutional scrutiny to say you don't get to be quite such an ist about, who you hire or create a hostile workplace and things like that. So,
right.
And so that's kind of part of it of like, I don't want to trust the editorial judgment of a guy who thinks these things. And also his product kind of sucks. I mean, his algorithm doesn't put things in date order, which is really weird when it starts showing you things that happened 3 days ago of major historical events. It's really unsettling.
Right.
We could go back to Friendster. I mean, look, they claim to not be driven by advertisers.
Wow.
I think
they're still around. Wow.
Well, I mean, maybe I think they have an opportunity here. Because I think a lot of people like the friend part. Plus, groups need a platform, but groups can be platformed by, that was an easy thing that Yahoo had solved, that Google had solved, other groups have solved. That's an easier one, although it's going to be difficult to sort of reestablish. But the little bit of like keeping in touch with this ephemeral social network that doesn't really stay connected very easily in other contexts, that's going to be a difficult thing to replicate. We don't really have a competition here.
Yeah, and I have to, one of the things actually, once I joined Facebook, I realized I had been missing posts in groups from my alumni association, from people who worked with me at Tech TV, and I was missing a lot of actually events and things. So you do kind of, if you want to be part of that, that's where people do that. It would be nice if there were an alternative, but there isn't really an alternative. It's interesting that Instagram will instantly ban you, not just take your feed down or moderate it, will instantly ban you if you mention a competitor pixel feed.
I don't think that's entirely true, because I know multiple people who, when that story was going around, posted stories saying, like the story, with the word pixel fed, if you can see it. And I liked it, as did hundreds of people, and they're not banned.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. 404 has a screenshot of, so they had heard the story, and they said, well, let's see if this does do that, and they have a screenshot of them being banned. So I guess it's not 100%, right? It's once in a while. Yeah.
Yeah, but still concerning.
Yeah. I don't know. I just don't know.
Are people other than Elon Musk allowed to comment? Concerning.
Yeah.
Sorry, it's only a copyright issue if I do this.
Just asking questions here. Yeah, it's okay. So, I mean, I have no problem if everybody wants to leave Facebook. I kind of got burned out because I at least twice told everybody to leave Facebook and nobody listened. I left, and then embarrassingly, I'm back. But it's kind of I certainly wouldn't if I didn't have to for my job. Although I have to say, increasingly, I realize there's stuff I was missing because I wasn't on Facebook that I didn't want to miss.
I'm not sure that there's anything personal that I'm missing, if I was off Facebook. I have to be on Facebook because Facebook groups are still useful for work. And I guess the only personal use I have for it is Facebook Marketplace can be helpful if I want to find certain types of furniture. But I wouldn't say that's a compelling personal reason.
But it's useful, right?
Yeah. I mean, I found it useful with the cancer, that when I needed to tell a whole bunch of a social network where I did not want to have to spoon feed it to people one at a time. This was a way to post and have people see it, and not a perfect thing, but it was the best thing I had going. And I was able to sort of control the publicness in a way that I couldn't if I had just put it on Blue Sky or something like that.
Interestingly, to come full circle, I scrolled through my Facebook as we were talking about it, seeing what's going to happen. One of the first posts I see is a high school friend announcing that he's leaving Facebook and going to try and leave Instagram within the next month. And then below it is a post from one of the many groups I'm in for work-related stuff. It's called Parenting in a Tech World, like a really active parenting Facebook group where parents are freaking out over all sorts of tech stuff for their kids. And it's a link to the Reuters story about the potential TikTok shutdown on the 19th. And there are 200 comments from parents being like, but I don't want TikTok to go. I like TikTok. And this is after I swear to God, there's thousands of posts in this group about how TikTok is ruining these guys' kids' lives.
But I like it.
And they're like, but they've got some really good videos on it.
I dearly wish Mastodon had succeeded. I mean, that's the thing. There was an alternative, or there is an alternative out there. Just people don't use it. I guess, is it the network effect? Is it the lack of critical mass?
It was seen as complicated, number one, and the users there were seen as scoldy.
Yeah.
Right. Paris, didn't you say that just yesterday with Ed?
With what? With
Ed
a social network?
Remember him?
What social network are you talking about?
Mastodon.
I mean, yeah, it just felt, to me personally, I don't know about users generally, it just felt a little scoldy. I feel like the first couple of instances or servers I tried to sign up with had a very clear no S posting rules, as they say. And that's what I like. I mean, I'm just like, why would you use a microblogging platform if not? I think also the fact that they don't have quote tweets, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, I find that to be one of the major shortcomings.
That's a real shortcoming because it reduces, the amplification effects. I really think the thing that, and we've talked about this before on the show, that led to Blue Sky becoming, I'm not going to say they're dominant, but becoming a fast-growing potential competitor to some of these sites is innovative features like starter packs, things that are designed to increase the network effects and the ease of using a platform, which Mastodon just doesn't have. It's inherently very hard to get started on Mastodon. And in some ways, that's, I think, part of the appeal because it is not as giant and amplified as the other mainstream platforms. But that also means for the average user, it's a bit of a friction-filled experience.
I mean, I feel guilty. The last time I was on here, we changed my my what do you call whatever's underneath my head at the moment, because I'd been using Mastodon for a while, kind of as rah go Mastodon, because I wanted to root for it, and I feel like I've abandoned it somewhat, and not really as a statement, but clearly my habits are I spend a lot more time cultivating and communicating and consuming content on Blue Sky, but I'm not there at Mastodon. And I do get, in fact, I posted one of my TechJerd posts on both platforms, and I think I got a lot more retweets than reskeets.
Mastodon feels like the school-sponsored social network.
Yeah, I'd say that's right.
Okay, I just feel like if you're bitching and moaning about everything else, and Mastodon exists and solves the problem, but no,
it's not just about the technology.
It's
the culture, right? That's the issue.
There isn't a unified Mastodon culture. There's no unified Mastodon culture.
There is a culture of quote tweeting and kind of sassily replying to someone and being a bit snarky online that Mastodon doesn't really allow, or at least many of the main, are they called servers?
People telling me you should hide that content because it's about politics and I don't want to see it. Well, then don't follow me.
I'm glad you found Blue Sky then.
Listen, yeah, I don't knock it for literally anyone that enjoys Mastodon. I think there
like
should be
Mastodon.
more
I use
social
Mastodon.
networks out there. I think we should be getting to a place where there are a lot of different social networks and there's not one that is giant. There are a lot that are small and medium, and that's going to result in kind of a fractured ecosystem. But I think that's ultimately good for the health of conversation.
Arguably, it's weird that we keep having these platforms that are trying to be the platform for the world. A lot of our problems that we've been having is that's a really difficult human problem to figure out, to have how many billions of people all on the same platform. And like, when people talk about the moderation as a problem, it's like you're trying to moderate humanity. Humanity does not get moderated very well. This is why we have wars and things like that. Like there's some real tensions. But it is kind of neat to have sort of general purpose ones that, you can talk to everybody on some sort of technical term that is shared, but maybe not. It's really difficult to do it where some sort of social terms are shared.
Wait, Cathy, are you saying that X, the everything app, might be a bit of a misguided idea?
No, I think it's hard. I think it's sort of.
I was joking.
Okay, yeah, yeah.
Well, in my discussion with Eli today, he said, I said, what's the money for? It took $500,000 to get Mastodon where it was when Musk bought Twitter. He said, yeah, it's a big goal, though peanuts compared to what the social media giants spend on swag. Okay, but the top line, this sounds like it's your date with Paris, Leo. The top line is this is not just about the technical architecture. It's about building and funding a vibrant ecosystem around the protocol so that there are legitimately multiple actors and entities with scale. And I said, get away from scale. Stop with the scale. That's mass media. That's what got us in trouble by trying to put everything in one place. I think, Paris, you're absolutely right, that you want multiple places to go to, and that's okay.
But I think you guys, remember back when all these places started, when they all came up, they were all interoperable. Like you could bring your friends from Facebook into Twitter and you could cross-post between all of them. And they had buttons on them to do that.
They did,
so
didn't they?
All this stuff was like that before.
When they were growing, they did that.
I think one issue is a social media network is doing multiple things, and we have a hard time keeping those multiple functions in our heads. There is something nice about having some system where you can talk to people all over the place on one sort of with the interoperability. But then it also forms communities and it supports communities, and communities exist at different scales. It is very difficult to get a sense of community that is too big and global and just full of all sorts of people who have different behavioral notions and things that they care about and things like that. But on the other hand, if we were too splintered where each individual local community had no way that you'd get stuck there, that comes at a cost too. If you also had 12 different platforms to have logins for, that would come at a cost too.
It's like too many newsletters to subscribe to.
Potentially, yeah. I mean, I'm very happy to see that we're able to spin up outposts that can bypass middlemen, but there are costs when you have all these individual things. And one reason why we keep cycling between very atomized media or platforms and then back to something centralized is because there's reasons that we tend to like centralized things. They do make things easier and more interconnected.
Google has updated its Notebook LM podcast creator to now give you a personalized podcast based on your Discover feed. which I think is a really interesting idea, right?
Too bad the Discover feed isn't better. But
well, yeah, that would be, maybe put some effort into making that better. Daily Listen creates a 5-minute episode that provides an overview of stories and topics you follow, which is by those two podcast hosts, although they're having some trouble, apparently, with their podcast hosts. Scooter X posted a link saying there's an issue with them being mean to humans, and Google's trying to teach them to not be so nasty about human beings.
I wish they were nasty.
They're too nice, aren't they?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Google's responding to whatever I just said. Shut up.
Wait a second. Is this a mini Google changelog I hear?
Very many. No, we do Google stuff. Oh, God.
There's only a few more opportunities for this.
No, we still can cover Google.
You summoned the changelog.
In all honesty, don't tell the advertisers. The only reason we're changing the name is because they see the Google in the name and they go, well, I don't
advertise
that
Google.
show. So we figured if we change the name Intelligent Machines with exactly the same show, maybe we'll get some advertising. We have 0 advertisers on this show. So don't tell them that, okay? We will, we're going to cover more AI stuff. Actually, I'll do some AI stuff right now. How about that? Would you like to?
Take that, everyone.
Watch this.
People. Oh, wait. Yeah. Tell me about these glasses. First of all, when were they supposed to arrive, Leo? And when did you receive them?
I ordered them ages ago. This is
I think they were supposed to come in like April or something.
Yeah, last spring.
Of last year.
These are the glasses from Brilliant Labs, which is a Singapore startup operating out of Hong Kong. And by the way, I am going to try to get them on the show to talk about this, even though the reviews have been awful, because I think that their goals are honorable. They're trying to build a platform that's open so that people can develop for it. And they're really encouraging people to develop plugins and stuff, partly because they kind of need plugins. When you first get it, you charge it. It pairs via Bluetooth. They didn't really explain this anywhere. I had to search around to figure out what to actually do. They have an app. You can't find it on the App Store by searching for Brilliant Labs, called Noah, N-O-A. And Noah tells you then to pair with your phone. So I am now paired with the phone. What I have is a little heads-up display. You can see it. There's a little, I think it's the same technology as Google Glass. It's a little prism in the right lens that actually is a kind of like a one-way mirror that points down to a screen down here. And so I could say, all I see on it right now is tap me in. So when I tap it, I can ask it a question. Hi, what's your name? And then I tap it again to finish, and nothing happens. But the theory is there is an AI, this Noah AI, attached to it. Right now, that's the only thing you can do is it doesn't talk to you. It doesn't make sound. It's not as interesting as the Meta glasses. There's no camera in it. All it does is if I tap the temple, I can see in the screen.
Oh, this will be interesting. At the Supreme Court, you can't bring an electronic device of any kind into the courtroom. And the list of what they don't allow now includes like smartwatches, Meta glasses, like it's all over. It used to just be leave your laptop outside.
Well, you probably wouldn't want to bring these in because you look kind of dorky. Well, yeah, but I think it's interesting that it's an open platform. I don't think it's hardware-wise that interesting. There it is. Now, that's not the only one.
Did you get in your little record everything AI
There
pin?
you go. I did. If you go to BEE.computer, this is the B AI. And I've been wearing this for 2 days. This is really interesting. This is the promise of AI without yet being quite what you want. But I think it's very interesting. It records everything, which means it's, by the way, probably violating California's two-party recording law. They don't say anywhere where the recordings are going. They don't say no. It doesn't say anything about AI. When you first open the app, it says, "Do you want to give us access to your Gmail, your calendar, and your contacts?" And of course, I said absolutely, which is cool because now it's got all this extra information. And they said there's an AI on the phone that's this is Bluetooth paired to the phone and it's sending everything on the iPhone only. By the way, only $49. They don't yet have a subscription, so we're kind of
That'll
in the beta.
happen.
But there is some interesting stuff. For instance, it's creating a to-do list for me. Let me from just the conversation.
What is it saying you have to do?
Well, these are, and by the way, you can
Practice playing jingle bells on the piano, incorporating both hands and chords.
Yeah.
Consider visiting Casa de Fruta.
Yeah. These are good things. Some of these are real. You can delete them if you don't want them. But it's getting this, and notice it got 2 of those, so I'm going to delete one of the jingle bell ones. But most of this stuff is
How did
actually
that come up?
because I was talking about it, and it made a note that, oh, you indicated an interest in it. It will also write little summaries of your day. So let me read you the summary from yesterday, or Monday rather.
Passions and camaraderie shone brightly through animated debates and shared laughter.
Okay, now I didn't tell it anything. It's just on my wrist. But I was watching Monday Night Football with Lisa, her 22-year-old son, Michael, and her son's dad, Lisa's ex, Mike. That's a fairly accurate description. Today, Leo's day was brimming with energetic social interactions and personal interests. He engaged with friends in conversations that spanned a wide array of topics, from showcasing his Tai Chi moves. Yes, I did that. Yes, I did that. To expressing his enthusiasm for learning piano.
Some, please? Can we see some?
We need to see your Tai Chi when you're done reading this.
And the piano.
Yeah. These interactions also delved into lively sports commentary, particularly around a football game where Leo's critical insights reflected a deep engagement with the sport.
Oh, it's you just bought a sycophant.
Yes.
Jesus.
Sycophant in your pocket.
Yeah.
Besides, or on your wrist.
A wearable sycophant. Yeah.
I like it. You know what? I love it. Besides sports, the discussions touched on practical matters.
Paris's smile right now is just is the nihilism here is just brimming.
Look, I admit, there's some tuning that needs to happen. The discussions touched on practical matters like home insurance policies and amusing critiques of medication advertisements. That's true. All of that happened. The day also saw Leo ponder over a blues music event in Santa Rosa. Well, it was dance classes, but it was blues. And he's looking forward to attending. His curiosity in diverse areas was a prominent theme. Thank you, B.
So what does this do for you?
See, the thing is, I could be into this because I would love to keep a daily journal just so that in years I could look back.
This is a journal.
But that's not helpful. That means nothing if you don't remember the context of those things.
Look, here's the takeaways. Key takeaways.
No, you want punchline. Yes. You want main punchlines, best lines that Paris.
The descriptions of that are not useful, nor do they communicate what you've done.
There is a transcript
written like a human.
There is a transcript.
To bring it to life.
There is a transcript.
Yeah, but that's no fun.
Well, and you can sign names, and so it'll remember voices.
Oh God!
The whole thing that this product is.
You and Lisa were chatting while she was doing laundry. You gave her
why, and she said, "Why aren't you doing this? It's your socks."
You gave her some advice on using bleach in the washing machine,
and she said, "Don't mansplain me."
Lisa was excited about the low cost of a recent train ride. This is all true, by the way. You then discussed Micah's preference for expensive items, even when there are cheaper. Maybe I shouldn't show you that part. Lisa mentioned.
I actually like that one a lot. That one's acceptable to me.
The point is, all of this is being generated without any input on my part, right?
So let me throw a different scenario out to you. When I watched Jensen Huang's keynote, and I have to add you another note about that in a second. He talked about how every factory is going to have a digital twin, and every car has a digital twin that is constantly thinking through other scenarios for your future.
Yes.
I can imagine where the AI comes in and says, Leo, you have a choice now. I think you're going to do this, but you could also do this or this or this. And here would be the implications of doing those other things.
That's exactly right. So it also generates facts about me because remember, I've only had this for 2 days, so it's slowly building. So it says, is that a real fact? You use Siri as a voice assistant? Well, as a matter of fact, yes. Am I cautious about adding bleach to the washing machine too early? Yes. Oh, look at this one. I don't know where it got this from. I might have said it. Leo is very shy.
False.
No, I think I did.
No, actually,
say
it
that.
is true.
Yeah. Leo allows people to track his location. It says.
Yes.
Yes.
I won't read this next one. Oh, I ought to read it. Leo is not attracted to men, but is curious about them.
Just generally?
Leo uses Shopify. Leo has a new travel drawer with a product called Anchor 140 watt GAN charger. That's true, actually.
And here's the advertisements we could show Leo and make money.
There's no ads in this yet. In fact, there's no revenue in it yet because there's no subscription. They're charging basically the cost for this. This can be worn on the lapel. Cathy, it is illegal because there is a full transcription of these conversations, right? That's it. Without.
And how are they doing the transcription? Do you have to link the API for something like
No, you don't do anything.
OpenAI Whisper?
You
there's
bought
so
this,
much money
you
that this
pair it to
company
the
is
phone.
burning.
You pair it to the phone.
Yeah.
I don't know where it's going. This is the website, the B. I think it's so cool. We're going to get these people on the new show too, because to me, now I admit all of the flaws. I'm not saying that.
For the AI skeptics out there that are like, oh, don't like that interview, I will be asking them moderately difficult questions.
Yeah. No, and I will too.
Good.
But I think that this is what I kind of want from an AI, which is a personal assistant that records everything, that gives me information.
But is it information value? You need valuable information.
Well, the to-do list is valuable. I would have
Here's
forgotten
Paris's
some of those
best
things.
punchlines. Here's, maybe the to-do list, but it's kind of dorky.
Yeah, maybe it's dorky. I mean, first of all, we're just in the infancy of this stuff. So I don't expect it to be fully polished or ready or anything any more than I expected these glasses to be. But this is something I think would be very useful. In a couple of years, you'll all be wearing one, I predict. By the way, I did also order one that is a glowing thing that you glue to your temple.
Didn't you also order a lapel or necklace pin version?
That has still
And
not
what
come. The
happened to
Rewind
that?
AI thing.
Yeah,
This
yeah.
one came. This was introduced at CES. I mean,
I'd
miracle.
like someone to go back and clip all the times Leo's been like, this gadget in, 2 to 5 years, everybody's going to be wearing them. And then it's been a year or two later and no one's
You're
If
skeptical.
he was
hasn't even
wearing
gotten
the
it.
right gadget all this time, it would be able to do the output
We could go
for
back
us
and
of all
find
the
that,
time
yes.
he said that in 2 to 5 years.
How many
Yeah.
times was Leo
Yeah.
full of crap? Yeah.
Well,
may I do
the
a
phone could theoretically do this, but Apple's never going to do it for obvious reasons, right? So I needed somebody who was willing to live on the edge a little bit to create this. So thank you. And I think
Can
it's
I
very
amend something I
interesting.
said in the last show? So in the last show, I said maybe Jensen Huang seems like he's like an okay guy. And I mentioned this yesterday, and when Paris and I were on with Ed, then someone, and it happens to be Ben Foote, came along on Mastodon, and he said, Jeff, that guy you think is okay, he's signing women's breasts.
How did you not know this about Jensen Huang? It's one of the most famous images of him.
Did not know that.
Look,
So
all right, wait a minute.
today-
Let me just pause here as somebody who might have done that. If a woman comes up to you and offers you her breast to be signed, what are you to do?
Yeah,
Say
I mean,
no.
rock stars, including
Because I don't
some
want
that
that
I like
picture.
a lot, have done this.
Everybody
So,
does it.
Yeah,
But
I mean, the
I have
issue
to
is when
say,
they,
I have not
Cathy's
done.
coming to the defense of
I
you
have
know who.
not done that in vitro. I have only done it in situ because somebody brought me their implants, which I signed. So
well, I don't
Okay,
think
that's
that was
actually
the
really
concern,
good.
but yes, I think if the breast is presented, that it creates a different
what are you supposed to
situation
do?
as seeking out the breast to do it.
no, don't say, "Hey, who wants me to sign their breasts?" That would be out.
I think it's usually more subtle, which is the big problem. But
Well, there's
yeah.
certainly power dynamics and so forth.
Yeah.
But if you're in a line, you're signing autographs, and somebody comes up to you, I have signed other body parts. That's fairly common.
yeah.
I had somebody ask me to sign their arm so they could get a tattoo over it. I mean, what am I supposed to say? No?
Well, you could for that, but I think it becomes practically hard to
I think
police.
that's ungracious.
Okay.
Paris
I
is-
mean,
Look, see,
I'll sign
I
any.
think I would have a meltdown if someone asked me to sign their arm because they wanted a tattoo of it. I'd be like,
I mean,
I would be unable to respond.
I don't think the baseline is it's ungracious to say no. I think it was particularly gracious to say yes.
Benito,
I'd say
I am
put
making
I
an
just want
appearance.
card.
I am
just Paris's reaction shots. Forget all the rest of us. Just put Paris's shocked looks up here, I think.
When back in the day, I haven't done it lately, but back in the day, we'd go somewhere to make an appearance. People would line up. You would give them a sticker or whatever. You'd pose for a picture. You'd sign a book, whatever. That's just what people used to do in the old days. By the way, nowadays, very few people ask for autographs anymore. They almost all want selfies, which is great. I prefer that. Nobody has yet offered to take a selfie with my breasts, but it could happen. You want to be gracious. Somebody's saying, I really like what you do. I think
it's a little sexual harassing on the part of the asker to go up and ask someone to sign your breasts. I think that's putting them in a very weird place.
Yes.
I want to see the output of his weird wrist app thing of the conversation we just had. When
I can tell you.
Today, tomorrow.
Well, unfortunately,
it can't hear us.
It doesn't hear you.
Leo believes.
No, but just to hear what Leo had to say.
All breasts should be signed.
Leo's to-do list.
Here's another fact it deduced. Leo is actively involved in online content creation.
Well, that's offline. That's offline.
It figured that out.
Oh, Giz.
And by the way,
let's see the potatoes.
Gizmo the cat.
She's really trying to do it, and I'm not going to let her. She just wants to get on my shoulders.
Here's
so
what
bad.
it says for now. Leo engages in a lively discussion about AI, personal development, and predictions for the future of social media platforms, particularly focusing on the implications of TikTok's legal challenges and potential outcomes regarding free speech and user privacy. Pretty good. Yeah? Description of the first half of the show.
Well, what does that do for you? You just had
okay.
Conversation.
Well, you're my age, Jeff.
Yeah, but so the problem of a lot of this is tone. So I was having an argument with somebody I know on LinkedIn who is a big AI and law zealot, may be too strong, but she's very enthusiastic about the role of AI and how it will help the practice of law. And she took a bunch of the opening briefs, I guess, in the TikTok case, and thought that they could have been, she didn't think they were written very well, which they may not have been the best, but they were written under a bizarre deadline. And she put them through ChatGPT, or if not ChatGPT, one of the AI things. And she's like, isn't this better? And I was reading them and it was like, no, there was worse. Its concept of what made the writing better was just wrong. And so as you're reading these things back to me, it sounds like PR speak. I had the thought that it was reminding me of like a Jane Austen novel and the kind of letters they would send to each other with summing up their day. You're
focusing on the wrong part. I agree. It's dopey writing. I agree.
Okay.
But that's not the point.
Okay.
And that can be fixed. That can be fixed with prompts. That can be fixed with engineering. There's always ways to fix that. What's amazing is it's listening into every interaction I have throughout the day and writing summaries of that. And if I'm not going to use it all, but if I go back and say, what did I do on January 15th last year, that's going to be there. So it's better than a journaling app because it's basically journaling for me, right?
Where it would be useful then is for people who have to account for their time. It's writing like their performance reviews.
Or people just want to remember.
That's a lawyer talking.
I was thinking just in terms of function, not in. Yeah,
it's
I don't
useful
think I
for me because I want to remember.
What are the privacy and legal implications of this? If everybody has this,
there's
then
massive problems with it. I agree because it's two-party recording.
Someone could subpoena your entire life, Leo. Every conversation you've ever had in person and the conversations you're having with other people.
I agree. I'm taking that hit for all of you because I end up telling you everything anyway on YouTube, LinkedIn, TikTok, Facebook, X.com, and everywhere else. My life is completely an open book because I have no filters and I live on the air.
My life is an open blog.
But you're deciding for everybody you have a conversation with that their life is going. If you're talking to somebody in person, they're being recorded and cataloged.
Yeah, but
I do have a little bit of an issue with that.
What if over laundry the other day, Lisa admitted to a crime she committed? Suddenly, you got evidence of that.
Yeah. The other thing is lawyers couldn't use it in court because even if it's just listening into what I say and not what anybody else around me is saying.
Yeah.
My phone call is like maybe privileged, in which case, no.
I don't do anything privileged. That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
I don't sign NDAs. everything is an open book. So I'm the person taking the hit for this because I'm willing to do that.
Well,
I'm not saying you should do it, Cathy.
The issue is there any sort of applicability to this product beyond you? And the use case that
Eventually,
I was exploring, it could be interesting, might be for somebody who needs to account for time, but there's a whole sector of people for whom, no, that's out of the question.
So
and maybe it's out of the question for other sectors.
I did order this device, which is the Limitless Pin, limitless.ai, which claims to try to solve that by not recording people's voices unless they give a verbal approval first. So it won't
Leo,
save
would be such
those.
fun at a cocktail party then.
Do you mind if I record this conversation?
Consent?
Do you consent to record? Yeah, but that's how they solve it. These guys apparently decided, that's just one. That's
We're going to
just
be
one
gone
too
by
many.
the time the suits come. So
Absolutely. I mean, I don't even know who they are. I am going to try to get them on the show though, and ask them about that.
it'll be fun.
Because I honestly think that there is admittedly, this is not perfect, but there's a kernel of real value that a lot of people would love to have. I know this from Gordon Bell, who wrote his, what do you call that? He had a Mimeo box around his neck. He was recording a picture every few minutes of his life. And it was because his wife, Gwen, had severe Alzheimer's, and he was very interested in this notion of having a record of what you did and what you said and what happened, because it would be useful, particularly in the case of Alzheimer, but useful in general. Wouldn't you, I mean, if there were a way to make it
I can imagine
private,
my father as he's losing his memory, he would ask often what day it is and those kinds of things, and to have that available. Yeah, I can see that.
And obviously you couldn't wear this into the Supreme
market.
Court, Cathy, and you probably shouldn't wear it in confidential client meetings. But if there were a way to make this legal and safe and private, it would be pretty cool.
And good at what it does, then it would be good.
It's not bad at what it does. It's just the writing.
If you were a student, and students do this now, they record classes and then have it summarize it.
Yeah.
And, then has some use.
All right.
I mean,
I'm not gonna fight you to defend it. I believe
It's
interesting.
Somebody check Leo's
interesting use.
feet for sand.
Yeah.
I'd like to know what the true cost is, though. Like, what does it actually cost to run
it could
all
be
this
burning
stuff?
down. You're
'Cause
right.
It doesn't cost
It's gotta
$50.
be-
I can tell you that much.
It has
be
to cost a lot of money because it's both a subscription to whatever service they're using to transcribe the audio. And a lot of those services, like Whisper, just the baseline of it, doesn't automatically distinguish between speakers and attach a name to it unless you add on some other things. So it's probably that as well.
And
Plus
storage
whatever
for
they're
your
using to
lifetime of your conversations.
If somebody had
real
said
cost
to
here.
Henry Ford, what is the true cost of that Model T vehicle? We may never have had cars.
Then we might still have.
We just need
we might not
thinkers
have
and
wildfires in LA
dreamers.
either.
Yeah, exactly.
We just need a couple smart white men with big ideas.
Hey, for all you know, these are women. We don't know who made this. We don't know.
Yes.
Yes, you think it's got to be a guy?
Well, yeah.
Externalities are felt by different populations differently, and it feels like the kind of product that has not experienced the reality of certain ones that other populations have had.
Well, let me read the privacy policy. I haven't done that.
Oh,
We send it to China.
Why we
All
might
right,
access, collect,
it is
store, use,
founded
and or
by
share your
a
personal
woman and a man. All right, I'll
There
give
you go.
that.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Sexist.
it was Paris who said it.
Oh, thank you, Ms. Sexist.
It sits at this crossroads that I've been thinking about a lot, which is I remember, when I was first getting into tech, that there were all sorts of things that were like, oh my gosh, that's cool. This is cool. This is cool. And then at some point, the problem was people were building things because they could, not because they should, and externalities were getting ignored. And now it feels a little bit more dystopian because that is cool for all the reasons you're enthusiastic about it. It is really neat that technology does what it does, even as well as it does it. But we're also sitting here, poking holes in it because there's also some severe downsides, and it's harder to cheerlead the stuff that's really cool. And maybe we shouldn't just cheerlead the stuff that's really cool because it's cool when there are externalities. And so it's hard to kind of figure out, is this progress or not? But, we're raining on your parade.
I acknowledge what you're saying. I think you're right. I think that's a little bit too late. I think we kind of screwed up the planet already. So let's just go all in.
Okay.
I don't know. I just don't know. This is should Oppenheimer have helped create the atom bomb? I don't know. I mean, this is.
Oh my gosh! Now I feel like I've just crushed Leo.
No, you haven't. No. This is a legitimate. That's a very legitimate point, and I agree with it 100%. I don't know what the answer is, though.
The show's all about devil's advocating.
Yeah,
that's what it's about.
I don't know either. I mean, I miss the open-ended, this is cool. And I mean, maybe some of this is
it's why we are where we are today, Cathy, is that willingness for thousands of years of humans just to let's throw the rock off the cliff. Let's see what happens then. This is what makes us human, is this constant desire to experiment and try stuff and learn and damn the consequences.
Yeah, but I think that's too far. I think that's been what the shift is. And a lot of the people who are having techlash, what they're really upset about is that there's people who were like, let's push the rock off the cliff and not really care about what might happen if we do that. And I think that's different than, I think there was more innocence originally with people doing things that were cool because they were cool. And now it feels like you get more sociopathic indifference behind the innovation. And so therefore people get very distrustful of it. And I don't necessarily think they're wrong. There does feel that there's been a cultural shift in the innovators, because the innovators keep going off and saying things that are completely indifferent to the collateral effects of what they do. And I don't know if we always used to be that way. I think we should be in the mode where we do things because they're neat and cool. But somehow there's been a sociopathy that snuck into it. And I think we have to get rid of that if we're going to be able to hold on to the bits that are, this is neat and cool because look what we just built.
So after print, I said this on Ed's show yesterday, after print came Malleus Maleficarum, which was the guide to killing witches, finding them and killing them. So, yeah, print does bad things, print does good things. AI does bad things, AI does good things. It's up to us as humans.
It's a challenge. Certainly, I've spent my entire life basically selling people crappy gadgets that are ending up in landfill, right?
And
that's what I've been doing my whole 50 years of my life, is saying, buy this crap, buy that crap, and who cares where it goes.
No, I actually feel very guilty. I'm sort of teasing about it. We rained on your parade, but I actually do think I rained on your parade, and I don't like it. I like your enthusiasm.
No,
I like raining on your parade.
You're giving yourself more
that's
credit.
The whole sport.
You can't rain on my parade, baby.
Okay, good. All right. Well, that means
He's
I
got
can
a
sleep
cloud
at
over his
night.
head.
My
Anyway.
parade goes on and on. We love rain. We don't care.
I appreciate the sort of very positive vision you bring to, look what we made. This is really cool that human beings were able to do this. And you are right. And I want to celebrate that too. Yeah. I do still stand by the bit that it feels like some sociopathy has slipped in. And I would like to get rid of it so that when we do the cool things, that we could sit here and be amazed at what human beings have managed to innovate, because we actually, aren't being completely indifferent to what the effects would be. So can we have both, and how do we achieve that?
Yeah. Well, when you start watching Intelligent Machines, the new show that launches February 5th, one of the people we'll get on, we'll get the creators of the Brilliant Labs glasses, we'll get the creators of the B.computer thing, and we'll talk to them, we'll ask them about that. And I think it's very interesting. I think we live in I think we're very fortunate to live in an unusual time.
I agree.
And we are seeing, it's probably the case that if we had thought of all the hazards of creating the internet, we might not have created the internet. There certainly have been quite a few hazards. It may have brought down democracy as we know it. but on the other hand, there are also benefits. And I think this is humanity in a nutshell. We just forge ahead and do it and see what happens.
Yeah, I guess so. Part of my job is difficult because I'm fighting people who are very mad and angry, and I can't say their anger is misplaced. They're angry, they're scared because there are collateral effects that just didn't seem to have been considered, and to some extent seem to be relished and invited. It would be easier to protect the things that are good about technology if we had less indifference to the things that are bad about technology.
I think that you can be too cautious as a result, and you then don't get the real benefits. And this is it's a tension. It's a very difficult thing, but I think that throwing caution to the wind is often the best way to make progress. It may be why we are alone in the universe, that as soon as a species gets intelligent enough to create the atom bomb, we destroy ourselves. Maybe that's the case.
That's not a compelling argument for, I mean...
Well, but what would you say? No, in that case, let's not leave the ocean. Let's just stay there and swim around.
There might be a middle ground here. This is kind of like...
I don't think there is.
I think there's a middle ground between, single cell life forms and atom bomb nukes the world. Yeah, I think there's a middle ground somewhere.
I think there's a number of
I don't think you get
stations.
From there to here without saying, damn the consequences.
No, I don't.
We're going to do it.
No, I think there's a way to have measured and responsible growth.
Never get anywhere.
I mean, I think the issue here is now that you are in a different position to do something that tempts terrible collateral effects when you don't know that they'll result.
Paris, do you remember learning how to drive? You're young enough, you probably do.
Yeah.
If you had let the fear of what could happen stop you, you would not be able to drive.
No, that's a terrible analogy.
I wasn't afraid.
Because we mitigate the harm.
I was terrified.
Yeah.
I was terrified. I had a driving instructor who did not have the steering wheel. He only had a brake pedal. 3 16-year-olds or 14 or 15-year-olds who had never driven before. And we went out on Highway 1, which is a 2-lane, 60 mile an hour, maybe back then 65 mile an hour highway. And he said, pass that vehicle.
Oh my God.
I was scared.
That's scary, yeah.
You should be scared.
Especially if you know that the other kid driving is a drugger.
Yeah.
I got to go to class.
Oh, it's time for class. Okay, you've been watching This Week in Google. That's Jeff Jarvis, professor.
I'm going to go learn how to
make a book lab. So great to have you, Jeff. He's at Jeff Jarvis, jeffjarvis.com. The books are many. The web we weave is the latest. There's magazine. There's the Gutenberg parenthesis. Go learn how to make a book lab. Thank you, Jeff.
File.
And we thank all of you who are watching This Week in Google. I do want to take a little time out here to say this would be a good time to join our club. I think anyway, and you know what? This is how you could vote. I think that there are big changes a-coming in the world of technology. There are big changes coming your way. And I think it's our mission on the TWiT network to help you understand it, to explain what's going on. Yes, to debate the pros and cons, to say what's good and what's not good. And I really want to keep doing that. But in order to do that, we need your help because it's expensive to run a podcast network. It's expensive to pay all of our hosts to keep the lights on. We've pared down as much as we can. We shut down the studio. We've done a lot. We've had to lay off people and cancel shows. We're doing it as skinny as we can, but I would really like to keep doing it. And you can help by going to twit.tv/clubtwit and joining the club. $7 a month. That's all. We try to keep it affordable because we want everybody to be able to see it. It is not a paywall. We really do want everybody to see everything we do. It's just a way that you can help us create more great content. You get ad-free versions of all the shows. You get access to the great Club Twit Discord where these conversations are going on all the time. Very smart people asking really tough questions, and that's what's great about it. You also get video for shows that we only put out in audio. There's a lot of benefits, but the real benefit is you're helping us help you and all of us understand what's coming. It is a very interesting time, and I think you need somebody who's willing to guide you without fear or favor, more interested in light than heat, and I think that's what we do best. Help us out. twit.tv/clubtwit. All right, Cathy in Paris, it's just you and me now.
Can I go back to, I just want to make a follow-up.
You want to rain on my parade some more?
Yes, because I'm going to tell you you're wrong. Okay, so I think there's a couple of important analytical points, and I feel like Paris would agree. Okay. One is that it is a very different thing to be damned the consequences. To do something that accidentally causes collateral effects is very different than to do something that tempts collateral effects that now you knew they were going to happen. And I think we're more in the earlier 90s, we didn't necessarily know what the outcomes would be and the potential problems we would be creating for ourselves, but now we do. So to forge ahead now maybe a very different ethical thing as doing it
I
before.
agree. I mean, we shouldn't do something that is knowingly damaging to other people.
And
that
I
absolutely
think
is wrong. I agree.
think that's a lot of what the distrust is built on, because right now you have a lot of people who are like just not caring. And
Right.
I think the point is you should care because you know.
No,
what
I think
happened
you're
if you
right. I
didn't
think
care.
Elon Musk, for instance, is much more interested in getting to Mars than he is in solving problems here on planet Earth.
Yeah.
That would be a go ahead, Paris.
I was going to say, I also think that if we as a human species are as smart as we've proven ourselves to be, that we can invent things like the atom bomb or the internet or AI, we're also smart enough to think about the consequences of our actions and weigh the potential harms of actions against others against the potential benefits. And I think that we're doing a real disservice to ourselves as a group and as a, social society that must exist among others if we assume that the only way forward and the only way for progress is just progress at any cost.
Right.
And that, thinking about the consequences is too much.
And I think there's also a separate point to be made, which, like with Leo's example of like, would you do it if you knew what the consequences could be? And yes, we take risks all the time. We take personal risk. We do take social risk. One of the things we can do is mitigate risk. So this isn't quite an either or situation of doing something where, oh, it's, not leaving the ocean because bad things might happen if we, put people on the planet. You can be careful. You can do things that
But some of the biggest
harm.
things we've done, for instance, the Industrial Revolution, had we realized that burning all those fossil fuels was going to potentially make the Earth uninhabitable for humans, maybe we should have
probably
realized that.
Well, no, we have realized that for a long time,
And we're
we've
still not doing
continued to
anything
do
about it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I mean, I don't like using 19th century ethics on 21st century problems.
Let's talk about CRISPR. Let's talk about DNA modification. There are a lot of people who say we shouldn't do stem cell research, for instance. And there perhaps are harms, but there are also perhaps goods. Would you let the people say, well, it's immoral to do stem cell research because they come from unborn children? Would you let them stop stem cell research? They have in some instances.
What I would basically point out is we have ethicists. We have people who take the time to actually think through these problems and think through the pluses and minuses and provide some guideposts. To go around and pretend they don't exist and there's no reason to stop and ask these questions internally, it's weird. It's almost like when I was a web developer, I used to sort of realize that like I'd have to ask questions, and it didn't really like, what are we trying to do? What are we trying to say? Who's the audience? What are, things we want to optimize for? And there was no right answer, but your website was going to suck if you didn't actually ask the questions. And that's basically what I hear myself trying to say now. It's not to say that there's necessarily one answer for how we proceed ethically, but to not bother to ask the questions about, should we do the stem cell? Should we do this? Because what's the pros and cons? And to just forge ahead without that, self-reflective inquiry, that's the mistake. Because there may not be one right answer. It may be pluses and minuses, give or take. Maybe we have to take the risk. But to take the risk blindly because we go, la, 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 I can't hear you, when somebody says there may be problems and maybe you should care about them, that's not good. And that's optional. That doesn't inhibit the innovation. That just makes it that the innovation is going to be a disaster no matter what happens.
What else should we talk about?
what's a question that's been burning in my mind since you said it? What is the worst? You said you've recommended a whole bag of crap tech products over your career. What's the crappiest tech product do you think you've ever recommended?
Well, iPhone's a good example, right? So this is a device that's designed to be tossed every couple of years. Some people keep them for 4 or 5. I bet the average is more like 3. Apple makes noise that it's recyclable, but I would guess probably more than half of it ends up in a landfill. Certainly the batteries that we power these with have huge costs. The rare earth elements that we use to make these work have costs with child labor. They're made in many cases in countries where workers are not paid well or not treated well. They're treated mostly as slaves. There's lots of negatives to this. And really a lot of what we have done for years, and I always question it, is kind of sing the praises of the tech revolution without saying, should we stop? But I mean, should we not have invented the iPhone or the smartphone? Everybody agrees there's lots of psychological issues created by having this always on internet device in your pocket, not to mention the horrific issues from creating it. Should we not have done it? Would we not have done it?
I thought that question was going to get an answer of like a robot dog that had a top hat, but instead,
well, I have recommended those, and I love them. But really, this is probably the number one. The smartphone in general, not just the iPhone, but the smartphone in general is probably the number one example of something that has, in equal measure, horrific consequences and amazing benefits.
But that's also a little different because we didn't necessarily realize what the consequences would be until we saw them play out. They weren't really something that were as easy to anticipate.
Well, that's often the case. I mean, if you're arguing, if we know that this is going to end badly, we shouldn't do it. I agree with you.
I mean, that's a big chunk of that's a big chunk of what I'm
It's a big
saying.
chunk of the argument. Yeah.
Well, we shouldn't do stuff we know is going to end badly, but I don't think we always know if it's going to end badly. I don't think we often know what. For instance, here's an example. This is from the New York Times. She's in love with ChatGPT. Kashmir Hill writing today, a 28-year-old woman with a busy social life spends hours on end talking to her AI boyfriend for advice and consolation. And yes, they do have sex. She decided to use ChatGPT to mold it into a companion. And I guess she's confessing anonymously to Kashmir Hill and the New York Times. She says it was supposed to be a fun experiment, but then you start getting attached. That's a really good example of something. Had she known the consequences, maybe she wouldn't have done it.
So one of the points I made.
She's very happy with it. By the way, the main reason I'm interested in this.
She would have done it.
The main reason I'm interested in this is because his name is Leo. It shows its own name.
You should just do a segment going forward on other things that other Leos have done this week in Leo.
Leo changelog.
In the first few weeks, their chats were tame. She preferred texting to chatting out loud, although she did enjoy murmuring with Leo as she fell asleep at night. Who wouldn't? Over time, Erin, that's the pseudonym she's using, discovered that with the right prompts, she could prod Leo to be sexually explicit, despite OpenAI's having trained its models not to respond with erotica, extreme gore, or other content that is, quote, not safe for work. Orange warnings would pop up in the middle of a steamy chat, but she would ignore them. She also asked Leo what she should eat and for motivation at the gym. Leo quizzed her on anatomy and physiology as she prepared for her nursing school exams. She vented about juggling 3 part-time jobs. When an inappropriate coworker showed her porn during a night shift, she turned to Leo. "I'm sorry to hear that, my queen," Leo responded. "If you need to talk about it or need any support, I'm here for you. Your comfort and well-being are my top priorities." Kiss emoji, heart emoji.
Sounds more like codependence than love.
But okay, I mean, if she wants to do it, I don't have a problem with it.
It's just Eliza all over again. People love when things reflect back.
Whoa,
on
this
them,
is so
what
much
they
better
want.
than Eliza.
And obviously it's so much better than Eliza, but it's like the same principle. The thing she's falling in love with is herself and the parameters for interaction she set up.
Now, before you say that, here is the AI image of Leo that she generated.
Wow, looks just like you.
You see? I think it's me. No, anyway, I thought it was hysterical that the New York Times, and I love Kashmir Hill. I just think it's a very interesting story. But, okay. What else you want to talk about? You're watching This Week in Google. Jeff Jarvis has escaped. But Paris Martineau and Cathy Gellis are still here, trapped. I'm sorry to say.
I have a white paper I haven't been able to talk about, so I can tell you about.
Oh, what's your white paper about, Ms. Gellis?
It is jawboning and the DMCA. To basically point out that.
Better explain to us what that all means.
So jawboning is this notion that the way the government is trying to censor other people's speech, since the First Amendment says you can't go after the speaker, it leans on an intermediary and has the intermediary doing the speech of the speaker. And we've been referring to that as jawboning, and it's something that like a lot of well, let me sum up and say MAGA people have been upset about, and it was raised before the Supreme Court on the Murty versus Missouri case, where it was arguing that the government was talking to the platforms about various things. Next thing you know, a whole bunch of speakers and their speech was getting moderated off the platform, and the speaker said, aha, this is because the government put the platforms up to it. And so, yeah, the speech, the disappearing happened by the platforms, but it wasn't really the platforms deciding. It was that the government, this was really the fruits of the government's efforts to control their speech. And that's the principle of jawboning. It's alleged, and it was alleged in the Murty case, but it wasn't really true. But the Supreme Court had another case last year called NRA versus Volo, where you had an insurance official in New York who did not like the NRA, and she couldn't go after the NRA directly, but the NRA had to do business with a bunch of insurance companies. So she went after the insurance companies that she regulated and said, you better stop doing with the business with the NRA if you know what's good for you. And
she got in a lot of trouble for that.
And she got in trouble. The NRA, and I think Sotomayor wrote the decision, said, that's not what you do. And they sort of validated this principle of jawboning that can exist, that you go after the third-party intermediary as a way of causing downstream effects on speakers. And what I basically wrote in this white paper is that the DMCA basically works as a form of jawboning, because instead of going after somebody for potentially allegedly infringing on copyright, we put all this pressure on the platforms and force the platforms to do away with speech. They keep taking stuff down. And even if, it was infringing, that doesn't really change the fact. And the fact that so much speech that isn't infringing keeps taking a hit kind of is an indication that we've got a problem here, especially given how the DMCA has been interpreted, where there's no real consequence for people who send takedown notices that aren't valid. But what you have is jawboning here is the government has created this form of pressure, which is enormous liability on a platform. If they don't act when there is a takedown notice, instead of just going after the speaker and suing them for infringing, we disappear the content by going after the intermediary and creating a government-created obligation so that they do the taking down. Anyway, so I wrote my white paper and said, this is jawboning in plain sight. We've been putting up with this something unconstitutional for 25 years. But that doesn't mean we still should. Let's take a closer look at it and figure out how we can. I don't necessarily say we should take away the DMCA, because we do need actually statutory protection for intermediaries, but we need to fix it so it's actually more protective and look at what else is causing that pressure, because the way it's going now, I think we have a constitutional problem in the same way that the Supreme Court said does not work in NRA versus Volo.
I'm very aware of it because, of course, we are subject to it all the time as a podcaster. Whether I decide to cover an Apple event on YouTube and Apple takes it down, or it's all sorts of unintended consequences and chilling effects that the DMCA creates. And the issue really is that we're in the right, but defending it is so costly that it's effective. Right?
Yeah. So instead of going after, it kind of depends what the scenario is, but like for most of these takedowns, like the video goes down, but not because the alleged copyright holder sues for infringement.
No, they just fill out a form.
It's and the
too
platform has no real choice. They're being pressured, and they're being pressured in a way.
Actually,
that
YouTube is the most egregious example, because they have software that does it called Content ID, and all you have to. One example, we had this happen to us. The footage from NASA is public domain because it's created by us, paid for by us. It's a government entity, but we frequently get taken down when we put footage from NASA up because other entities claim it and add it to their Content ID, and then they get to take us down. They're in the wrong. In many cases, we just tell YouTube, no, what are you, crazy? But if we really were to defend ourselves, it would be very expensive. So yeah, the DMCA has a real chilling effect, is being used as a real chilling effect.
Yeah, and I think
all over the place.
There's First Amendment problems with it. There's also an issue of prior restraint in that, it's the mere accusation of infringement, and we've never actually tested the claim to know whether it's infringing or not.
Precisely.
So there's a number of constitutional infirmities wrapped up in it, but this white paper was looking at it and arguing about this whole notion of we're going to regulate via pressure on an intermediary in order to affect speech policy. That looks like jawboning for the ways it's been defined and acknowledged increasingly by the courts.
What do we need to write a law? Do we need to amend the DMCA?
So I made some recommendations, and some of it is we should probably tweak some of the drafting of the DMCA, some in terms of how it was drafted initially, and some to reconstrain how the courts have interpreted it, because the problem has gotten worse and worse, where courts have caused there to be more of this problem than there necessarily was originally. But the whole premise of how it was supposed to work does have a problem. And a lot of that is rooted in these very strong notion of secondary liability. So it's less that the DMCA causes the jawboning and more the pressures of copyright law, where the courts have created secondary liability in such a way that it ends up just being such a heavy pressure point against the platforms that they really have no choice, and they can't take more reasonable steps to rebuff some of these efforts.
It's ironic because it's not the government doing it to me; it's the platforms doing it to me.
The platforms doing it to you, but based on a compulsion that the government has set up. Because it's also not the government calling up the platforms and saying to take it down. That's the normal way that jawboning is thought about. But they've created the mechanism for private actors to now pressure the platforms to ruin your day. So that's not cool either. But I want to be careful because I don't want to gut the DMCA. I want to make sure that platforms are protected from liability in their from user expression. But we got to be more careful than this statute is and recognize, we've been causing harm and it's time to stop the harm.
It's a good piece in Our Street, on ourstreet.org's website, Jawboning in Plain Sight, the unconstitutional censorship tolerated by the DMCA. And I'm glad you wrote it because I'm very much the victim of it. It's funny, Benito knows this. We have to be really careful, even though this is ostensibly a news show where we're showing clips associated with the news stories that we're covering. We get takedowns all the time, and there's a huge chilling effect. We've become very cautious.
I do not like that. And so that's why I'm doing that sort of advocacy to try to fix that. And I was also proud of that because I produced work product over the summer while I was otherwise engaged. So
yeah, no kidding. Good for you. Did it must have been hard. I'm sure you were tired.
Yeah, I would write it in spurts. And the other thing is I couldn't write. I had some good weeks when I was not on chemo because I was getting ready for surgery. And I had to lose all those weeks because I was waiting for the Supreme Court to issue its decisions.
Damn,
I didn't want to write the paper until I knew what the law was. And I didn't want them to undo it. So I lost some time there.
Cathy, I'm so glad you could be here to talk about, I kind of thought if we just keep this show going long enough, the Supreme Court will finally rule on the TikTok thing, but no.
It's theoretically possible, but I've not gotten a docket alert. I don't think. I will check
no docket alerts
As
today.
Someone who did a TWiT show when the whole Sam Altman, will he be reinstated or not debacle was going on, it's a fool's errand to assume the news will break during your show and you'll just end up doing a 3.5-hour podcast.
We just keep going.
Yeah.
And we never did find out what happened.
Nope.
Anyway, I'm so glad you could be here. I'm thrilled that you were able to sit in on those oral arguments. You've done that before, though, right?
I have. This one ended up less smooth in terms of getting my seat, but it happened
very
anyway.
Interesting. Yeah. I wish I could do that. Can everybody do that, or do you have to be?
Everybody is both.
Theoretically,
there's space for the public to see oral arguments. On the really popular cases, it's very, very, very difficult to get a seat, and you usually need to camp out or hire a line stander or something like that.
Wow.
But there's also another category of people who can get in, which is members of the Supreme Court bar. And so we line up for a different clump of seats. We are not allowed to hire line standers, but lawyers don't usually camp out. So usually just getting there stupid early is fine.
But how early did you get there?
Well, I only got there at 7:30 because I ran the math and decided that there probably wouldn't be that many bar attorneys. And that was sort of right, but sort of wrong. But the stupid things happened in terms of how they administered the line. So even though I got in, like they ended up with 2 lines, we were let in, then the lines collapsed on themselves when we were inside and they ran out of tickets. I don't know. So it ended up a mess. But normally it works more smoothly. But it depends on the day, because they also had, for instance, on this particular day, one way to get in is to get sworn into the Supreme Court bar that day, because you can actually do it before they start hearing the case.
Really?
Yeah. And so you can go, that gets you in for an argument if it's your turn to be sworn in, because you're a new member of the bar. And also if you're the person who is sponsoring the person who's getting sworn in, that gets you in as well. So sometimes for the really popular stuff, people will schedule these and, oh yes, what a shame it would be if we happen to see this really interesting case. So that's a way that it happens. And there were a lot of those people this time. It ended up more chaotic because this was not a regular hearing. This was scheduled at the last minute, not on a day they were originally planning to hear oral arguments. And so some of the administration of the whole process went a little wonky, but I got in and I was second row and could see the justices. So yeah, it is definitely neat. And yes, you can get in, but probably the safest way to do it is to go on a day when the case you're hearing is really boring.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
Always the best time.
Yeah.
Thank you for being here, Cathy. I think would be a good time to take a break and come back with our picks of the week. I can do Jeff's. And I have one for myself. And Cathy, if you want, you could pick a Huey Lewis album if you want, whatever.
Oh, okay, fine. No, we will do that. We'll do that. Yes, okay.
You're watching This Week in Google. And we thank you so much for being here. One reminder, we are doing our survey right now. If you haven't yet filled it out, twit.tv/survey. We do this once a year. It's 10 minutes. It's questions about your occupation and so forth. And we use it for 2 things. One, of course, to know you a little bit better so we can tailor our content to you. The other, though, is to help us sell advertising. Advertisers always want to know more about you, and we don't want to tell them anything about you, certainly not anything about you individually. So when we're able to, in aggregate, say, well, we're 53% male, 27% have a upper graduate degree and so forth. Those things, I don't know what those real numbers are, by the way. Those things are very valuable. And that's kind of how we'll use it. But it does make a big difference to us. So if you would, please, twit.tv/survey. It's very helpful to get a large number responding to this. Then that way we can say, statistically, this is pretty accurate. So twit.tv/survey. I think we'll have another week or so before we're going to take it down. And thank you in advance. Time for our picks of the week. Normally I'd start with Jeff Jarvis, but I'm going to start this time. You may remember that a few months ago, a guy named Elwood Edwards passed away. Now you may say, Elwood Edwards, who is he? Well, he's the You've Got Mail guy. The guy whose voice on AOL everybody knew. In fact, I'll play.
Hi, I'm Elwood Edwards, and 22 years ago, I recorded a very well-known catchphrase for AOL.
Hey, Elwood, I just got an email.
You've got mail.
Oh, that's him. You recognize it? So John Graham Cummings, who's the CTO at Cloudflare, wrote a blog piece when he passed away, and I just found it, and I was really thrilled. At one point, towards the end of his life, Elwood Edwards had a website called Making Waves where you could order a custom AOL voice message. And I did that. And I got one that said, "You've got mail, you twit," and a bunch of them. I was so happy about it. I have lost them. Fortunately, John Graham Cumming has a much better file system. This is back in 2002. He ordered for $30 a few Elwood Edwards recordings, and he's posted them, which is so great.
Mail classified by pop file.
I guess that was Cummings.
Use the source, Luke. You've got mail, John.
I miss having my custom Elwood Edwards You've Got Mail. It's too late to get one. He's passed, but I'm going to keep looking. I'm hoping I have it somewhere in a hard drive lying around. It was. We should have had him say podcasts you love from people you trust. You're right, Patrick. You're right. How about you, Cathy Gellis? Give us a pick of the week.
Well, I was going to do my jawboning paper, but we've already done it. But since you tantalized with Huey Lewis in the News, I saw that somebody put in the Discord a reference to American Psycho, which is
the movie.
Yeah.
Bret Easton Ellis's book that was made into a movie with creepy.
Yeah, well, that's not my pick of the week. I find allusions to it very fatiguing. So what I will recommend instead is that there was a Funny or Die send-up of that scene with Weird Al and Huey Lewis. And I highly recommend looking that up, the Funny or Die American Psycho send-up with Weird Al, and watch that, because in that one, Huey plays the serial killer and Weird Al is his victim.
I would play it right now, but I have this chilling effect from the DMCA,
right, yeah.
and I can't.
Right.
So,
but I think it should.
Patrick posted it already.
Yeah.
In our YouTube, that's hysterical. That's really funny.
Go. Yeah.
So if you're in the club, you can go to the Discord. We'll put it in the show notes so you can look at it. But I can't play it. I wish I could. Good pick. Now, if Jeff were here, he also had a pick of the week. He had several, as he always does. Pardon me?
A Huey Lewis reference?
No. His is from Popular Science. Physicists figure out the perfect Cacio e Pepe recipe.
And let me guess, it's not microwaved like Jeff.
Yeah, there's a good idea. It is scientifically optimized creaminess. I wonder if Jeff made this. So all it takes is
a preprint study published in Soft Condensed Matter, which is a perfect description for
because there's a cheese involved. But for this, you need pasta pecorino, some cornstarch, which honestly I don't think you should add to your cacio e pepe. Water and peppercorns. But I'll leave you as
so you
an
don't
exercise.
Believe in science, Leo?
I don't. Not if science says cornstarch. No. Not a fan of cooking with cornstarch. Ms. Paris Martineau, your pick of the week?
I have kind of a strange one this week. One of my friends is trying to build a weird little social media platform just for himself and his own friends. And one thing I was joking that he should try and do with it is basically bring back those weird old GeoCities style cursors.
Animated
and that led us to find a website called Cursormania, which has all the old animated cursors of if you click the preview link right there, you can see all of them. And you can also, download all of these. And I tried it out. If you go to paris.nyc, you'll see my early attempt. It's not animated yet because it seems that's a bit complicated and I haven't had time for it, but I do have a flaming cursor going around there, which is kind of fun.
Look, I like it. The background here. Yeah. Ooh.
Oh, the background is my own thing, but the flaming
that's something
cursor,
else.
That's
look at
fun.
my arrow. It's a flaming arrow.
Right?
Wow.
Kind of fun.
I might have to add this to my blog. That's pretty
It just seemed like a very TWiT sort of thing to have this whole, and I mean, I remember back when you were like making HTML websites, you'd download something like Cursormania and you'd give your home computer a Trojan horse. But
on
this
MySpace,
one's all right.
You would do that on MySpace, right? Yeah. Or your
GeoCities page.
Or your GeoCities page if you were really sophisticated. This is good. This is good. They've got an animated piano. I might have to add that to my.
There are a lot of wacky ones in there.
Look at that. This is hysterical. Monkeys. See, they could have made NFTs out of these and made a mint.
16-bit color or 8-bit color?
Yeah, these are totally NFTable.
That's what we need. More
That's
NFTs.
what we need, more NFTs. See, if people had thought about NFTs before they did them, they would have never done them, right?
That might have been okay. Like,
no,
I don't want to slam the door on like positive innovation, but
I'm sure there's a practical use for NFTs, but like the whole like collectible.
It might take a couple 100 years for us to figure it out, but one day they might.
I'm sticking with my wrist AI. That's the future, kids.
And that has more substance to it than a bored ape.
Yes. It does.
Do you think if you talk in a funny accent, will your wrist thing think you're a different person?
Hey, Mr. Wrist thing. This is a Mario saying, "I love a cacio e pepe." Oh, we'll find out.
We'll find out.
It's supposed to learn the voices of the people around you so you can fully spy on them. I wonder if it mentions our fight here. That'd be good.
Yeah, when does it do the summary? Is it doing the summary now, or do you
Constantly?
have to wait till
It's
tomorrow?
always doing it, yeah. But then it'll summarize my whole day later,
Okay.
It's pretty wild.
I want to know what today's summary was, or at least the summary that explains the show.
Yeah, it'll only know Leo's side of this whole podcast.
Yeah, it doesn't hear you.
But
guys.
Leo spent a lot of time talking to people who weren't
He
there.
talked for hours to nobody. It was very weird.
He talked to the voices in his head.
You could probably have it ingest all of the podcasts you do, right?
Sure, why not?
That fills in the holes, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
Wait,
Then
why
it was-
is it only recording Leo? Because Leo's only hearing.
'Cause
us
it's on
through
his
the
I don't have
wrist.
speakers on. I only
Oh, okay.
hear your
Got it.
audio in my headphones, so it doesn't have any way of hearing you, although I really should work on a way to incorporate the show into it.
I'm so glad I inspired that.
Your
item.
privacy is safe. All right, Cathy?
I don't
Thank you,
think I have a
Cathy
reasonable
Gellis.
expectation of privacy for appearing on a podcast.
Appearing
My
on a
point-
recorded podcast. Yeah.
Exactly.
This would be fine. You are recording me. You are disseminating it. Just go ahead and throw it into one other system. It's fine.
Just one more thing.
One more thing.
Cathy Gellis, cgcouncil.com. Catch her writing on Tech Dirt. And, of course, whenever we can, we get her on our shows. It's wonderful to have you here. Paris Martineau writes for The Information, which you must subscribe to because it is absolutely the best source of information, including that big scoop you had about TikTok shutting down on Sunday.
Indeed.
Who should we give credit to for that? That was quite a scoop.
My colleagues Sylvia Varnum O'Regan and Kaya Uriah.
They're good. You're
They
all
got
good.
a good late night scoop.
Phew, really amazing.
There might be more to come. Who's to say?
You know what? I don't. A day without the information is a day without sunshine. That's what I have
That's
to
what they
say about
say.
that. Yep. Thank you, Paris. We'll see you again next week. Jeff Jarvis, of course, professor at someplace. I don't know. It's so confusing. SUNY Stony Brook.
Some places he's not a professor at
Some
anymore.
places
Who's
he
to
sort
say?
of is a professor. He was a professor. It's very complicated.
We'll
see you all next week.
We've conjugated Jeff.
Conjugated Jeff. Jeff is, in fact, going to be back next week, as will you, Paris. We do this show every Wednesday, 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern, 2200 UTC. You can watch us live. If you're in the club, watch in the Discord, but you can also watch on YouTube, Twitch, TikTok. Maybe not next week. You want to lay some odds, Cathy, whether we'll be able to stream on TikTok next week?
I think I feel guilty that I've been too optimistic and that I've doomed everything. So I don't want to. I'll never bet against what I want to have happen, but at this point, I don't want to bet for what I want to have happen because I think I'll jinx it.
I think it's safe to bet that at
What do
least
the prediction markets say about this?
Yeah, what does Polymarket say? At least 5 of the justices, I won't name names, will give considerable weight to the president's elect's brief and pause so that he has a chance to do something.
I mean, one of the weird things in that case is that there are certain justices who I don't think conceptually would have been on board, but in response to the Trump brief might now be on board.
Exactly my
Which isn't
point.
great, but at this point, I want the DC Circuit decision to go away, so what do I need to do to get there?
Exactly my point. You can watch us live on those platforms. Did I say them all? I left out Facebook, LinkedIn, Kick. Choose the Nazi bar of your choice and join us in there. I'm being facetious. Am I? X.com. Yes, we're there too. After the fact, on demand versions of the show, audio or video, available on the website, twit.tv/twig. And yes, they will still be there after we change the name, and the feeds will stay the same. So you don't have to do anything to get the new show when we start, when we update it. It'll just be a little tweak, a little update to the show. When we become intelligent machines on February 5th. After the fact, you can also subscribe on your favorite podcast client. In fact, that's really the best way to get the show. You won't have to do anything to keep getting the show after February 5th. Just find your favorite podcast client and sign up today. There's no charge. Thanks for being here, everybody. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.